Hey everyone, welcome back to Paranormal M. Thanks for being here tonight. Before we get started, please subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoy the stories, leave a like. Tonight's first story starts back in August 2012, when the person sharing it was about to begin senior year of high school. After a quiet stretch, strange things began happening again, this time at their dad's new house, and from there, the experiences only got heavier. So get comfortable, relax, and let's begin. I hope you all have a peaceful night and sleep well. Hey, I want to share with you some experiences that have been part of my life. Moments that blurred the line between our world and something far more mysterious. It all started back in August 2012, just before I was about to begin my senior year of high school, and things had been quiet for a while after some earlier strange events at my mom's place. But this new chapter? It was something else entirely. My dad had recently moved into a 2-story house, a fresh start for him and my stepmom. Not long after settling in, they discovered something eerie. The previous owner had passed away there, and, strangely, her beloved cat had died just days later, seemingly from heartbreak. That revelation seemed to stir something in the house. One night, Dad was taking a nap when he suddenly felt something jump onto the bed. At first, he thought it was my stepmom and leaned over to give her a kiss. But when he turned, there was no one there. Instead, he noticed an imprint on the bed, something curled up, as if an invisible presence had nestled beside him. It sent a chill down his spine. The next day, Dad saw a shadow figure dart past him on the stairwell leading down to his bedroom. When he told my stepmom and me, she dismissed it as paranoia, blaming it on his marijuana use. But I could tell Dad was shaken. Then came a night when they went out for dinner, leaving me alone in my room, sitting at my computer. Now, my bedroom door is a stubborn one. It clicks loudly when fully closed and takes some effort to open. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Thinking it was them, I went to check the door. Just as I reached for the handle, it clicked shut, and the doorknob started turning on its own, then suddenly flew open as if kicked. I peered out, but no one was there. I called out, but silence answered me. My heart pounded. I locked the door and tried to shake off the unease by scrolling through Facebook. Moments later, footsteps echoed again, and the doorknob began jiggling. I mustered the courage to call out firmly, "Please, leave me alone." To my surprise, it stopped. When my dad and stepmom finally got home, I rushed out to tell them, but Dad brushed it off, and my stepmom just ignored me. Those quiet days were shattered when Dad got a frantic call from my stepmom. She was screaming, crying, barely able to explain. Dad rushed to pick her up from the grocery store, where she was having a full breakdown. After settling her down, he shared what had terrified her. While standing in an aisle, she caught a glimpse of a black figure at the end of it. In a blink, it was right in her face, whispering chilling words. "There's nothing here for you. You're not welcome. I will get you." That night, chills ran down my spine and sleep eluded me. Months passed with no incidents, and I ended up with a pretty amazing girlfriend. Let's call her Mia. One night, as we lay in bed, I recounted all my ghostly encounters. She laughed, dismissing them as nonsense. Just then, my door clicked open with a bang, the room temperature dropped, and footsteps retreated down the hall. Mia freaked out, and I couldn't help but tease her, doing a Johnny-style impression from Night of the Living Dead. "They're coming to get you, Barbara. Mwahaha." But then the footsteps returned, coming closer, and I realized I might have poked the wrong spirit. I hurriedly shut and locked the door. After that, things calmed down, though sometimes I'd feel a presence curling up next to me, or hear a cat meowing outside my door, even though I'm allergic. It was as if the house, or something in it, was still reaching out. After graduating, I returned to Copper River Princess Lodge for my final summer season. The first month was quiet, but then, one early morning around 3 a.m., I woke to the sound of someone in my room. At first, I thought it was a friend who had keys, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw a translucent figure levitating, touching my jackets in the closet. It turned toward me and floated nearer. I pulled the blanket over my head but dared a peek. It was just waiting, watching. I pleaded, "You're scaring me. Please leave." Immediately, the oppressive weight lifted from the room. Right after, my friend Sanchez texted me to meet her in the TV room. She'd had her own encounter, a black figure flicking her beer can pyramid. At first, she thought it was me playing a prank, but then she realized she could see through it. It charged at her until she covered herself with a blanket and told it firmly, "Fuck off." We stayed awake together, feeling something poke at our backs and ribs, accompanied by a muffled laugh. The next night, Double D, a girl I was seeing who worked as a night auditor at the hotel, called me, terrified and crying. When I arrived, she was hiding behind the front desk, shaken. She told me she had seen the black figure near the bar's portraits, acknowledged its presence, and asked it not to bother her. But suddenly, it was right in her face, moving closer without her seeing it approach, snarling and laughing with a distorted, inhuman face, missing teeth, pocked with holes. She'd barely escaped as it slammed into the glass door, leaving its eerie imprint. Double D stayed with me afterward, saying the bed shook while she slept, or she heard footsteps when I wasn't home. Others at the hotel had similar experiences. A housekeeper once woke to find a figure sitting on her bed, touching her leg. A week later, my close friend, who we'll call Luke, visited with his fiancée and her friend before heading off to basic training. Not telling them about the paranormal happenings, I booked them into room 138, a room infamous for strange complaints, footsteps, voices, lights, and TVs flickering on and off. I figured Luke could handle it. After all, he once fought off an attacker at 15 without help. As we walked to their room, his fiancée stopped, asking, "Who's that little blonde girl peeking from behind the soda machines?" We looked, but nothing was there. That night, they reported voices in the bathroom, something grabbing Luke's fiancée's friend's foot while she slept, and the TV turning on and off. I finally confessed about the ghost, the blonde girl in the white dress, curious but harmless, seen since the lodge opened. The land itself used to belong to Alaskan native tribes before partnering with Princess Touring. Later, my cousin mentioned the Bayless House, a cabin in Glen Allen tied to our family since the 70s. It had a dark past, stories of abuse, murder, and dark rituals. I heard several chilling accounts from family members who had been there. My grandmother once babysat in the Bayless house. After putting the baby to sleep, she heard scraping noises upstairs. When she tried to open the door, something was holding it shut. With help, they broke it down to find the baby thrown across the room, but unharmed, wrapped in the closet. The floor bore deep scratch marks. My grandmother never returned, and tragically, the baby died soon after from lung disease en route to the hospital. Years later, my cousin and aunt, along with friends, visited the house to play with an Ouija board. One friend, deeply religious, begged them to leave. Suddenly, she started bleeding, convulsing, speaking in tongues, and bit my cousin's forearm with canine teeth, marks that no human teeth could have made. Despite warnings, my friends and I explored abandoned trailers near the Copper Rail Depot Saloon. In one, Pretty Boy fell into a hidden cellar, a maze-like space with a rusty bed frame, handcuffs, and old underwear scattered about. The atmosphere was suffocating, and we fled in terror. In another trailer, after an ill-advised explosion near rotten food, we discovered decomposed remains of a cat. It was clear the area was steeped in darkness. The third trailer was like a time capsule from the 90s. We split up exploring, finding ammo, expired pills, a camcorder, and vintage hockey cards, items we foolishly took. That night, We all had nightmares of violence and torture, haunted by visions of an old man. We returned the items under cover of darkness, but as we prepared to leave, a noise behind us and approaching footsteps forced us to flee in panic. Determined to confront the Bayless house, Gare Bear, Pretty Boy, Fake ID McGee, Red, and I arrived around 1:30 a.m. We laid down a salt circle for protection. Exploring, I found a secret crawl space leading to a child's closet, revealing deep scratch marks. Suddenly, we heard a baby's cry, haunting and human-like. Pretty Boy disappeared. After frantic searching, we found him in the garage, distressed, clutching a vintage Scooby-Doo lunchbox, mumbling about not being able to leave, haunted by screams and visions of past wrongs. Inside the house, he spoke to unseen entities, his voice shifting between his own, a woman's, and a deep, otherworldly tone. He pleaded for mercy, revealing a dark secret. Years ago, he'd harmed a girl while intoxicated. After calming him, we vowed silence, but word got out. Gare Bear's sister and her boyfriend, DJ Fuckhead, joined an attempt to revisit the house, only to be chased off by sinister forces manifesting as demonic laughter and terrifying visions. The next day, Pretty Boy and another friend went missing briefly, only to be found under strange circumstances. Pretty Boy wielded a booklet with photos of family members connected to the Bayless house. When confronted, he collapsed. We returned the items with another friend, who fled in terror when confronted by shadowy figures. Since then, we've respected the Bayless house, understanding that some places are better left alone. These experiences have taught me that the past lingers, shadows of pain and sorrow imprinting themselves on the world, whispering warnings to those willing to listen. Hey, I want to share a story with you that still gives me chills when I think about it. It happened back in September 2020. My wife and I had this routine. Every night, I'd drive her to work. Nothing special about that, right? But the route we took passed through this quaint little country town called Riley, near Oxford, Ohio. There's this big hill on the road heading down into the town that we knew like the back of our hand. We'd been down that road so many times, every tree, every mailbox, every road sign was familiar to us. So, one night, as we were rolling down that hill, just about to enter Riley, right behind the big green sign that welcomed you to the town, something caught my eye. There was a man standing by the side of the road, just looking straight at us. And let me tell you, this wasn't just some ordinary person standing there. Something about him felt out of place, almost otherworldly. I glanced over quickly, trying to get a good look before we passed him by. And at that exact moment, my wife turned to me and said, "Oh my God, did you see that?" I was about to ask what she saw because I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining things, and she told me exactly what I'd just seen. He was dressed like a Civil War soldier, and I'm not talking about some guy in a costume. No, this was different. He looked too real, yet not quite human. My wife said she saw his face clearly, but I didn't. His whole figure was glowing white, almost like he was lit up from within. My headlights weren't shining directly on him, but he was bright enough that he stood out in the dark. His face was the strangest part. It wasn't detailed like a normal person's face. It was just a blank, glowing white space. No features, just a smooth, lighted area where his face should have been. He stood with his right leg propped up on the small incline by the road, holding a rifle like it was a cane. He wore a kepi hat. You know, those flat-topped caps soldiers used to wear during the Civil War. His entire figure shimmered in shades of white and light gray, glowing softly but clearly visible. That was it, just a moment, and then he was gone as we drove past. It left me and my wife stunned. After that night, we made it a point to drive that way every single night, hoping to catch another glimpse of him. But as the pandemic hit and my wife lost her job, those drives stopped and, sadly, we never saw him again. I've thought about stopping by the house closest to where we saw him, just to ask if the people there ever noticed anything strange, or if maybe someone was playing a prank with a costume. But honestly, how could someone explain the glowing figure with a faceless head? It just doesn't add up. I haven't stopped wondering though. Maybe I'll find the courage to ask one day, or maybe I won't. Oh, and here's something else that adds to the eerie feeling about the area. There's another cemetery in Riley nearby, and a man, who was never known for spinning tall tales, once told my dad that he drove by and saw a werewolf there. The whole area just has this creepy vibe that's hard to shake. So yeah, that's the story of the Riley soldier, an apparition or something else I can't say. But every time I think about that glowing, faceless figure standing quietly on the hill, I get this mix of awe and unease. It's like the past is reaching out, just for a moment, to remind us it's still there. Hey, I want to share this story with you. Something that happened a few years ago. Something that still gives me chills when I think about it. It all started when my best friend and I, both a bit curious and maybe a little reckless, decided to try out a Ouija board. Now, we didn't just want to do it anywhere. We wanted the full, eerie experience. So we picked this massive old graveyard we knew well. It's the kind that feels like a wild woodland more than a cemetery, thick with overgrown bushes and winding dirt paths that twist and turn in every direction. The place is locked up tight at night, but we'd snuck in a few times before, so we weren't strangers to it. Right in the heart of this graveyard, there's an abandoned chapel. It's all crumbling and forgotten, with a small memorial area right out front. That's where we set up our board that night. We sat down facing each other on the cold, uneven ground, the Ouija board between us, the night wrapping around like a heavy blanket. The air was thick and still. No wind, just the faint rustle of leaves far off. I remember feeling a little nervous but excited as I asked, "Is there any spirit here that wants to talk to us?" Almost immediately, the planchette began to move, slowly, almost hesitantly, gliding toward the word yes. We exchanged glances. I was shocked. A tiny voice in my head wondered if my friend was just playing a trick, but he looked as stunned as I felt. We pressed on. Next, I asked what their name was. The planchette moved again, slowly inching toward the letter B and stopping there. It didn't move to another letter, just stopped. I asked aloud, "Is your name B?" And then the planchette moved to yes. That's when a cold little knot of unease started to form in my stomach. Curious, I asked, "Are you male or female?" The planchette drifted slowly to the letter F and just sat there. It wasn't spelling out a word, just lingering on that single letter. I started to doubt again, thinking maybe my friend was messing with me, moving the planchette so slowly that it looked like it was moving on its own. But I'd known him most of my life and trusted him. Then I asked, "Are you happy?" And suddenly, the planchette shot across the board, fast. So fast it startled me and slammed down on no. That's when everything changed. The night seemed to close in tighter, the darkness deepened, and the wind that had been whispering just stopped altogether. There was this eerie, sharp, cold feeling that sliced through the air, and an unnatural calm settled over us, like the world itself was holding its breath. I glanced at my friend, and he looked just as shaken. His eyes were wide, and his usual confident demeanor was gone. But somehow, I couldn't stop myself. I asked, "Is there anything we can do to help you?" The planchette zipped quickly to yes again. Fear crawled up my spine then. I realized it wasn't my friend moving the planchette. He looked genuinely scared, and he's one tough guy. I asked my final question, "What can we do to help you?" And this time, the planchette flew across the board, spelling out very clearly, "Get out." We stared at each other in silence. My heart was pounding. I said, "Okay, goodbye," and the planchette moved fast to goodbye. At that moment, we jumped up and ran, fast, through those winding paths, branches snapping underfoot, the cold air burning our lungs. We didn't stop until we reached the main gate, where we scrambled out onto the street. Outside, everything was normal again. Cars passing by, streetlights glowing softly, a few people walking down the sidewalk, chatting and laughing. The normal sounds and sights of the world felt like a warm blanket after the cold silence of the graveyard. We stood there, catching our breath, still shaken, wondering what the hell had just happened. Was it real? Was it just our minds playing tricks? Or had we truly contacted something that night? I believe we did speak to a spirit. I haven't tried the Ouija board since, but that night stays with me. I still think about it sometimes, and I wonder what you think about all this. Do you believe in it? Because I'm telling you, that was one night I'll never forget. Hey, I want to share a story from when I was younger, back in middle school, living in one of those cozy neighborhoods filled with charming brick bungalows. It was a summer day, warm but with a gentle breeze rustling the leaves outside. I was upstairs, curled up with a book, completely absorbed in the quiet world of pages and words. Suddenly, I heard a faint blast, like a muffled pop from somewhere nearby. Honestly, I didn't think much of it at first. It was so indistinct, almost like a far-off firecracker or a car backfiring. I was home alone that day, which made everything feel a little more eerie now that I think about it. Then the phone rang. Yes, this was before everyone had cell phones. Remember those long cords tethered to the wall? I went downstairs to answer, the house still and quiet except for the shrill ring slicing through the silence. It was a family friend on the line, sounding a bit shaken. They told me they'd heard on their police scanner that a gun had been fired at the house right next door to mine. As we talked, I could hear distant sirens wailing through the neighborhood, growing louder by the second. After hanging up, I stepped out onto the front porch to see what was happening. The evening air was thick and still, the usual chorus of birds and insects, strangers absent. I noticed one of my neighbors nearby, her voice piercing the quiet with desperate screams. "She did it! Oh my God, she did it!" Emergency responders had their arms around her, trying to soothe her frantic sobs and frantic shaking. The terrible truth came out. Her daughter-in-law had taken a shotgun and ended her own life, right at the top of the stairs leading to the second floor. The tension in the air was suffocating. I later learned that the daughter-in-law's husband, who ran a bar and was known for meeting women frequently, had cheated on her again. The family stayed in the house for a while longer, but eventually the husband decided to move his mother, the woman who had been screaming, down to a warmer climate to escape the memories. Time passed, and a new family moved into that house. They had 2 daughters, one of whom was about my age. We became pretty close friends, and they slept upstairs in that same top-floor area. It was a single long room with a private bathroom and these massive closets that felt like little rooms themselves. Fast forward to high school. One night, a big group of us were carpooling to a school dance. As we pulled away from our houses, my friend suddenly realized she'd forgotten her ID. She was crammed into the back seat, and that was sitting more towards the front. She handed me her house key, telling me the ID was on her bedside table. I didn't hesitate. I got out and walked into her house, which was completely dark. I flipped on the switch, which lit up the front interior with a soft glow. Her parents were out for the evening, and her sister was away on a business trip, so the house was empty. I headed up the stairs towards their bedroom. The air was colder than I expected. I thought maybe they turned the heat down when they weren't home. I hurried across the long bedroom to the bedside table and grabbed the ID. But then I had this sinking feeling, like something was very wrong. I turned, and there she was. Fern. Well, her name was Fern, but I always think of her as something else now. She was standing there, not far from me. To say I was terrified would be an understatement. My heart pounded so loud I thought she might hear it. But she wasn't menacing. She smiled gently and gave me a small wave, kind of like an old friend greeting me. I blurted out, "Hi, Fern. It's nice to see you again." Then I bolted out of the house faster than I ever thought possible. When I got back to the car, my friend was already screaming, "Don't tell me what you saw, don't tell me." She knew something was going on, something she'd experienced before. I was trembling the whole ride there, and our other friends tried to calm us down. Later, I felt a strange mix of fear and pity. Fern, I think, was just so lonely. She meant no harm, just lingering in a way that was more sad than scary. That night, and many nights after, I thought about Fern, about how her presence was a reminder that sometimes people's pain doesn't just disappear with their passing. Sometimes it lingers in the quiet corners of old houses, in the shadows of staircases, and in the memories of those left behind. And maybe, just maybe, it reaches out not with anger, but with a silent longing for understanding. Hey there, I want to share some stories with you. Some pretty spooky ones, actually. They all involve encounters with ghosts, or something even more unsettling. So, grab a blanket, maybe turn on a little nightlight, and let's dive into these chilling experiences. First up, there's this tale from a cousin of mine. Let's call her Cassie, who lived with her boyfriend out in a quiet, rural part of Melbourne, Australia, back in 2020. The place was a large old house, once a childcare center, now a private home. It had these really long, echoey corridors, 3 rooms and a hallway that seemed to stretch forever. 2 of the doors in the hallway were nailed shut, and the windows were always bare. No curtains or rods. To this day, that alone sounds eerie, especially at night. The house was set back far from the main road, surrounded by thick trees and bushes so dense that the streetlights barely made it through. Cassie's first experience happened after one of those exhausting days working at the hospital during the height of COVID. She went to bed early, around 9:30 p.m., hoping for some rest. But then she woke up. Not fully, but that groggy kind of waking up you sometimes get. But this time, it wasn't because she needed anything. She just felt this heavy, oppressive presence sitting right at the end of her bed. She tried to stay calm, breathing slowly, but the weight pressed down on her legs, creeping upward until it felt like something was crouched right on her knees and thighs. She was terrified, but didn't dare open her eyes or move. Cassie told herself to pretend she was asleep, because she felt like if this presence knew she was awake, something worse might happen. She was bundled under 3 blankets, wrapped tight around her like a cocoon, trying to feel safe. But then, slowly, she felt the blankets being pulled down, one by one. The weight shifted up to her hips, just above her belly button. Her breath caught in her throat as the blanket slipped away, and the mattress beneath her shifted slightly, as if whatever it was had knelt or stood there. Tears started to well up, but she bit her lip hard to keep quiet. The first blanket was gone, then the second started to be pulled off. Cassie felt pure, heart-pounding terror, honestly fearing for her life in that moment. And then, she thinks she might have fainted, or at least passed out, because she remembers that dizzy, light-headed sensation before everything went blank. Her second encounter happened another night when she was lying awake, unable to sleep, stressed over an upcoming university assignment. She'd tried to watch some Netflix, Collateral, but gave up, sinking back into the dark, half covered by her blankets. Suddenly, something grabbed her arm, yanking it from the covers and holding it up in the air. Frozen, she stayed still, pretending to sleep. Her arm was held stiff, perpendicular to her body, and she could feel something heavy kneeling on the mattress beside her. She whispered a quick Hail Mary prayer and tried to move her arm casually, as if shifting in her sleep. But the mattress shifted too, like the presence was climbing onto the bed. Then, abruptly, her arm was dropped, tingling heavily, like when your elbow hits the funny bone too hard. The last of Cassie's encounters happened in the early morning, sunlight filtering through the blinds. As she pushed the blankets off and tried to get out of bed, something grabbed her waist and pulled her back down, wrapping an arm tightly around her. She froze, completely unable to move. Then, pressed close to her ear, a whisper said only one word: "No." She shivered violently, gathering every ounce of strength to break free, and bolted from the room, only to bump into her cousin's boyfriend on the hallway, wide-eyed and shaken. Now, switching gears, let me tell you about a story from my childhood, about a babysitter named Helga. When I was around 3 or 4, my parents' old friends Helga and her sister Jean babysat me after preschool. Helga was a huge St. Louis Cardinals fan. The house was painted cardinal red, with the logo above her TV. She always knitted me a blanket, a rainbow one, and was so kind, letting me nap in her room and treating us to pancakes sometimes. One morning, when my mom dropped me off, I walked inside and saw Helga sitting in her rocking chair near the door. She looked asleep, but she wasn't. I tried waking her up, calling, "Hi Helga, wake up, it's morning." But then my mom and Jeannie realized before I did. Helga had passed away right there in the chair, from a heart attack. It was such a confusing and sad moment for a little kid. I remember my mom taking me outside, police arriving, and me asking them to come back inside so I could say goodbye. Years later, on a trip to visit her grave with my family, I saw a bright red cardinal perched in a fake cherry tree in our driveway. I like to think Helga's spirit is still watching over me. Now, for a more intense haunting, there's a story from a friend who lived with his girlfriend in a small, cheaply built house near their college campus in 2017. The house had a flat roof, a detail that would take on a new meaning later. And at first, nothing unusual happened. But soon, their smoke detectors started going off randomly, multiple times a day, even without smoke or cooking. They changed batteries repeatedly, but it didn't help. Eventually, they took the batteries out, but the alarms still went off. Desperate, they turned off the entire smoke detector circuit. Then, strange things began to escalate. The house had a back storage room that always felt eerie, like someone was watching. One night at 3 a.m., the smoke detector in their bedroom beeped a long, continuous sound, like the test button being held down. His girlfriend grabbed a chair to reach it, but just before she touched it, the beeping stopped. Then the next detector down the hall started the same pattern. This happened repeatedly, leading toward the creepy storage room, as if the entity was trying to show them its space. This bizarre occurrence continued once or twice a week for over a year. At the same time, the house became infested with bugs overnight. They'd come pouring out of light fixtures, cracks in walls, and even the smoke detectors. Exterminators came repeatedly, but the bugs always returned, making their lives miserable. Then came the footsteps, heavy, hoof-like stomping sounds on the flat roof, starting near the storage room and walking toward their bedroom, loud and deliberate. They'd rush outside looking for animals but found nothing. The haunting escalated to sounds of metal bowls being thrown off the counter, even though nothing had moved. This happened multiple times daily. They stopped using the bowls, but then heard ceramic plates crashing and cabinets slamming violently, despite having soft close hinges. One night, the The phone's face-tracking camera caught a yellow square indicating a face hovering at the foot of their bed, too high and in a spot where no one was. They had posters on walls, but the square stayed fixed no matter where they moved. Face-tracking anomalies became a constant, terrifying feature of their home. The final straw came when their friend Jame stayed over. Around 3 a.m., she woke feeling a heavy presence stepping onto the couch. She sensed feet on either side of her body, slowly moving from feet to head, feeling a malicious energy watching her. Cabinets began slamming violates in the kitchen nearby. Jame pretended to sleep for hours, terrified. Eventually, they sold the house at a loss and moved away. The friend still wonders about the poor soul now living there. His takeaway? If a house seems too good to be true, maybe it is. From another perspective, there's the story of a high school freshman, let's call him Max, who comes from a family sensitive to the paranormal. One morning at school, Max arrived early and was walking to class through the crowded entrance when he locked eyes with his art teacher. Normally friendly and approachable, the teacher looked startled, and Max noticed a dark aura above his head. A painful chill ran down Max's spine, and he felt drawn to the teacher's energy in a way that scared him deeply. He struggled to break their gaze and hurried to class. Later, chaos erupted. News spread that the art teacher had committed suicide the night before. Students panicked and cried, but Max insisted he had seen the teacher that morning. Many accused him of lying, but then 3 upperclassmen approached, confirming they had seen the teacher at the same time, in the same place, with the same eerie feeling. It was a shared, surreal experience none would forget. Next, there's a haunting tale from northern Pennsylvania, near an old mining cemetery known for ghost stories. Around 2006, a group of friends went for their annual Halloween visit. While standing among the headstones, a white pickup truck pulled up a nearby hill, its cab light on, but no driver was visible. They called to a friend to check inside, and after seeing no one, she jumped back into their vehicle, pale as a ghost. The truck slowly backed down the hill and disappeared into the night. To this day, they wonder if it was a ghost truck or the most elaborate prank ever pulled off. Finally, there's a more subtle haunting from someone who grew up in a house about 40 to 50 years old. They never experienced anything like this anywhere else. The most persistent was the faint sound of clanking metal, pots and pans, coming from the kitchen late at night, though no one was ever there. It happened so often it became a lullaby of sorts. Then, once, while running through the hallway, they caught a glimpse of a 5 to 6 foot tall figure dressed in brilliant white. A figure they named the Bride. It was fleeting, seen only from the corner of the eye, but unforgettable. Whether it was real or a trick of the mind, they still wonder. Each of these stories reminds me that the world is full of mysteries, some frightening, some comforting, and some just plain strange. I hope sharing them with you brings a little thrill, and maybe even a sense of connection to those unseen corners of our lives. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and if you ever feel a presence, remember, you're not alone. Hey, I want to share something that happened to me during my very first night shift at a gas station. Now, working nights at a gas station is definitely not what any young guy dreams about, but sometimes you just gotta pay the bills, right? I was determined not to let money slip away from me again. I had big plans. If I could just make one small investment and move to Minneapolis, I'd be set with a 6-figure salary. But the funds were nowhere to be found. So here I was, stocking shelves at this small-town gas station. Money is money, and there's always a future to look forward to. Or so I told myself. I had done a few day shifts before and knew the place pretty well. But this was different. My very first night shift alone. No supervisor in sight. Jada, my supervisor, was heading out for the night and kept repeating the same instructions like she was on a loop. Maybe the high staff turnover made her forget I wasn't that new anymore. "No phones," she said firmly. "If it's slow, make yourself useful." I nodded and smiled, trying to hide my nerves. I decided to tackle the worst chores early: cleaning the bathroom, restocking the freezers, taking out the trash, checking the receipt rolls, watering the plants. Took me about an hour, and it wasn't even midnight yet. I was practically done with my tasks. I thought about mopping the floor, but figured I could save that for later. I was feeling pretty good about being useful. After that, I settled into my fourth game of teamfight tactics when I suddenly realized I'd forgotten my name tag. Not a huge deal, but I figured I might as well grab it. The manager's office was usually locked, but tonight I had the keys. I opened the door and started rifling through the drawers. It didn't take long to find the box with name tags. At first, I thought they were all blank, but as I sifted through, I saw names. Lots of names. All previous employees. 100, maybe more. It was insane. I mean, yeah, high turnover is normal, but this was next level. I started wondering why so many people quit or disappeared. During day shifts, there was always someone new being trained or interviewed. I'd only been there a week, but felt like a veteran already. The only regular faces were the managers, Jada, Kennedy, and Alicia. They seemed decent enough. So why were so many people just vanishing? Just as I was pondering this, I noticed a customer outside, literally right by the door. I waved, but he didn't respond. He just stood there, too close for the automatic doors to stay shut, but they didn't open. This guy, late 30s, scruffy beard, rough red shirt, a bit chunky with sunken, bloodshot eyes and a natural frown, stared in at me. I waved again, no reaction. "Can I help you?" I called out. Silence. No blinking, no movement. I pulled out a chair and sat down, trying to calm myself. The man stayed put, just staring. I couldn't see a car on the cameras, no sign of him arriving or leaving. Was he on drugs? Just weird? I gave him the few minutes, but he didn't budge. Finally, I stood up. "Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave," I said. He ignored me. He was shorter than me, but easily 50 pounds heavier. Could be trouble if things got physical. "I don't want to call the police," I said, pulling out my phone and holding it up to show him. I even dialed 911, but still, no reaction. Then my phone rang. Unknown caller. Just past midnight. I answered, still keeping an eye on the creepy guy outside. "Yeah?" I said. "Please don't hang up," a voice whispered. "You're in danger, and I can help." My heart started pounding. I paced back and forth while the man's unblinking, bloodshot eyes followed me relentlessly. "Who is this?" I asked. "I'm Angie," she said. "I used to work here, same shift, same managers. I wanted to warn you." I remembered seeing an Angie name tag in the box earlier, maybe even a few. She sounded young and nervous. "In a few hours, something terrible is going to happen," she said. "If you're not out by then, you might as well be dead." "What are you talking about?" I asked, eyes darting outside. "Look outside!" I'd been watching the man at the door, but across the street, I spotted more people, about a dozen, emerging from the woods. They lumbered forward slowly, their movements stiff. "I need you to leave," Angie urged. "Just walk out. Nothing will happen if you just walk away. Nothing will come for you." Who are these people? What's going to happen? I don't know what... "Look," she interrupted. "It's simple. Just walk out the door." Something inside me screamed not to step outside. They felt wrong, dangerous, malicious even, though I couldn't explain why. Still, I moved toward the door. Leaving seemed like the only option. but it wouldn't open. It won't open, I said, panic creeping in. They want to keep you in there, Angie said. They don't want you to leave. They want you to stay and die. Die? What do you mean? I stopped pacing, fear tightening my chest. Tell me exactly what's about to happen, I demanded. There's something in there with you, Angie sighed. It could be minutes or hours, but that thing is coming for you. What thing? The man with bloodshot eyes now had two others with him, a young man with a grotesque overbite and a young girl who looked barely older than a child. They all stared with empty, broken eyes, just inches from the door. It doesn't have a name, Angie said, but it'll leave you empty, like the people outside. But if I leave, I'll be okay? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. Hold on, I'll check the back, I said, desperation pushing me. I hurried to the employee entrance at the back. The handle was cold, and the door swung open easily. Outside, another 4 people stood waiting. 2 young men, an older woman, and a teenage girl. They all stared like they wanted something. I stopped short. Why do they come here? I asked Angie. They serve their master, she said. They want the spoils. What spoils? I thought about it. She meant me. Right, I said, nodding slowly. Are you at the back door? Yeah, I'm here. Just walk out, she whispered. It's not too late. I hesitated. Why lock the front door but not the back? If they wanted me trapped, wouldn't both doors be locked? The door's open, I said. Great, you can still make it. Why wouldn't they lock the back door, Angie? She paused. I don't know, she finally said. But trust me. They gave me the keys. I can lock and unlock this door 100 times. What's going on? They don't usually do that, she whispered. I shut the door and stepped back. 4 more pairs of eyes watching me. Look, Angie said, voice trembling. I was the last to leave. They messed up. I found a spare key and got out before it was too late. Maybe they want you to think it's safe, but it's a trick. Yeah, sure, I muttered. I'm trying to help you, she cried. Those things out there are just to scare you. They're harmless, but here to keep you trapped. I've got one voice telling me to leave, and dozens of creeps staring at me. No locked doors, just fear. What am I supposed to believe? Fine, call the police. Hang up and call them, she shouted. I ended the call. By now, 8 people had gathered at the front door, silent and still. I tried calling emergency services. Silence. No dial tone, no ring, just emptiness. I called my mom, friends, nothing. Tried online, only cached pages. Even my phone's background switched to a black screen. Then, a strange smell filled the store. The frozen goods I'd just stocked started to smell rotten. Our flowers by the counter withered and died, all except the sunflowers, which turned a sickly blue. I tried the landline in the manager's office. As I entered, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered Angie's call. How are you calling when everything else is down? I asked. I still have the email password, she said. Checked your application. Calling from a private network. They? I asked. I thought it was just one thing. No, they work together. People don't just disappear without notice. A conspiracy? Yeah, people come and go all the time. No paperwork, no records, just a box of name tags. It made sense in a twisted way, but I needed proof. Why didn't you call me sooner? I had to make sure Jada wasn't around, she said. She would have tricked you. I'm not sure you're not tricking me. Why would I call you just to have you fail? If I was part of this, I'd have let you die, she screamed, then fell silent. I counted my breaths, eyes fixed outside. The crowd had grown. How did you know what game I was playing? I asked. No answer. Silence. You're watching me. You knew I was alone and nervous. Yeah, she sighed. You tried to get me out before it got worse. That's not... She sighed deeply, heavy breathing filling the air. I was ready to hang up. This was a trick. She wanted me outside, to join them. I'm just trying to help, she said softly. I studied the people outside, their blank stares piercing me. Felt like a snake charmer surrounded by snakes, waiting for one wrong move. I have all the passwords. I wanted you to have the best chance. I hoped they wouldn't come tonight, but when they did, I had to do something. You're not being honest. I'm not lying. It's hard to explain. It sounds insane. I don't want to throw you off. Tell me straight. What's coming? It's not real, but it's there. It steps through the world. Air, time, some kind of ripple. Then it shoves a spike into your head and takes something from inside. A spike? Yes, into your mouth. No mouth of its own. You're just gone. My mind spiraled. Over 18 people outside, all staring. If I stepped out, I'd know for sure. Suddenly, the lights flickered, a loud hum, then blackout. One fluorescent tube burned out, others dimmed to nothing. This is real, I whispered. Now, Angie screamed. Get out! I bolted. Tripping and tumbling in the dark, I crashed into the lunch table, barely breathing, mouth aching as if bracing for pain. I fumbled for the back door, pulling instead of pushing 3 times before it budged. Angie? I gasped. Hurry, you can make it. How did you see it in the dark? It was right there. I can't even see the sign on the door. How do you know about the spike and what it does? You said you never saw it kill. You're missing the point. It doesn't add up. You're lying, not trying to save me. She stopped breathing. The call ended. I stood in the dark, heart pounding, every little noise amplified. The breeze, the crackling wires, the ventilation struggling to restart. My hand still on the door handle. You lied, I whispered. Then, footsteps shuffled on the other side. Yes, Angie's voice echoed from beyond the door. I stood frozen for what felt like an hour until the power returned. The crowd was gone. Angie was gone. My phone worked. I called for help and broke down crying when the police arrived. They found me locked in the bathroom, panic-stricken and barely able to speak. Cameras caught a mob gathering outside, but couldn't identify anyone. Jada and the other managers were called in, genuinely surprised. No one knew why people disappeared or quit. Maybe it's just how things are. Or maybe there's more than one Angie out there, trying to warn short-term workers. The front door? It was just broken wiring causing it to jam. That broken door was the only thing that saved me that night. I would have walked out as soon as Angie told me to. I worked there for another 4 months, sticking to day shifts and weekends. The night shift seemed to go smoothly after that. Maybe Angie and her friends moved on. I've saved enough for my move to Minneapolis now, but I wanted to get this down on paper. Looking back, it feels unreal. But I know this for sure. There are things out there. Things that want us to join them. Hey, I want to share a story with you. It's about how a silly prank spiraled into something much darker than we ever imagined. It all started a few years ago when I was a senior in high school, just your typical restless teenager, really. My parents, overwhelmed with my 3 younger sisters, had pretty much stopped trying to keep me in line. As long as I wasn't hurting anyone, they let me do my thing. So, on this particular night, I snuck out to meet up with my friends down by the path that leads to Willow Lake. There were 6 of us gathered there, with Braden taking the lead and his loyal sidekick, Vicky, close by. When I joined the group, I saw why everyone was so quiet. There, lying on the road, was a dead man. Middle-aged, probably in his 50s. It looked like he'd been dead for a few hours. Judging by the whispers and hushed tones, my friends had just found him. To them, this poor guy had become some kind of strange spectacle. They had already gone through his pockets and agreed not to call the police. Their plan was to leave him there and let someone else find him on their morning walk. While the rest of the group was talking about how gross and unsettling it all was, Braden was plotting something. They had taken all the loose cash from the man's wallet, but Braden wanted more, something memorable. "Vicky, hand me your pencil," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. She hesitated but passed it over. Then, with a strange kind of care, Braden pressed the pencil into the man's throat, puncturing it in 2 places. Blood started to seep out, even though the man was already dead. I was shocked. "What are you doing?" Vicky protested, reaching for the pencil. Everyone else stared at the body in stunned silence. The puncture wounds looked like something straight out of a vampire movie, 2 neat holes right where the arteries were. Braden grinned, clearly pleased. "This'll get people talking. It's hilarious." Sure enough, the next day the town was buzzing. An elderly woman had found the body and called the police. The cause of death? Apparently an aneurysm. But the wounds, the so-called vampire bites, were what caught everyone's attention. Braden was proud as punch. There was even a short segment on the national news about the Willow Lake bloodsucker. Yeah, that was us. No actual vampires, just a bunch of dumb kids acting out. The story was quickly debunked, but the damage was done. The headline had already grabbed national attention. But the real nightmare didn't start there. A few days later, I was meeting Vicky and her friends at a nearby convenience store. Vicky had her own car, and we were planning to grab some Chinese food. As we stood outside, a man sprinted past us. He looked terrible. Ragged clothes, an unkempt beard, wild hair tangled in all directions, sunken eyes that seemed almost hollow. He didn't even glance our way. It was like he was running from something terrifying. His shoes barely clung to his feet, flapping with every desperate stride. Across town, more people like him appeared. I heard of at least 6 different instances, panic-stricken individuals stumbling into places like the police station and the school cafeteria. Some were arrested, others sent away. But all of them were searching for the same thing, the Willow Lake bloodsucker. The first time I actually spoke to one of these people, I was waiting in line at an ATM. At first, I thought he was homeless, but there was something off about him. His pupils were minuscule, leaving his eyes almost entirely white. He trembled as he approached me, struggling to stand steady. "Do you know the bloodsucker?" he asked each person in line. When he reached me, I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "It's fake, right?" I scoffed. "He died of an aneurysm." "No," he said, his voice shaking. "It's real. It's here. We have to find it." He looked like he might break down any second, like his whole world depended on this. To me, it was just a frustrating rumor, but for him, the bloodsucker was terrifyingly real. Meanwhile, Braden and the others didn't care. To them, messing with a dead body was just another night's mischief. Vicky was practically living the vampire lifestyle, staying up all night with Braden, skipping school, partying hard. I'd heard she was into some serious pills. But around town, people were on edge. The rumors were growing, and with these strange, desperate people roaming the streets, paranoia was spreading. Neighborhood watches started popping up, and the police were pressured to act. Braden even had one of his house parties shut down after an anonymous tip claimed he knew the bloodsucker. Not that surprising, considering, in a way, Braden was the bloodsucker. One Friday night, Braden invited us all over for another party. After what happened last time, I wasn't interested. It was nearly midnight, and I was snug in bed, so I ignored the invite. The next day, I went to his place for our usual Saturday lunch. When I arrived around noon, Vicky's car was in the driveway. Braden's parents had gotten him his own place about a year earlier, so nobody was around to keep an eye on him. Still, something felt wrong. Vicky hated spending the night anywhere but her own home. Inside, the place was a wreck. The couch was flipped over, and the air smelled like iron, sharp and metallic. A glass table was shattered, with dry flowers scattered across the floor. Blue sunflowers Vicky had given Braden when he moved in. It looked like a violent struggle had taken place. Blood spattered on the ceiling made no sense. How did it get up there? I stood frozen, calling out for Braden or anyone else, but no one answered. There were no bodies, just an unlocked door and utter chaos. I called the police immediately. They took over the scene and told me that several people had been reported missing. At least 6 had been at the party, and 3 were now gone. Likely, they snuck out during the night, and their parents noticed their empty beds in the morning. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was tied to the bloodsucker. But was it revenge? Or something else? From then on, I was consumed by paranoia. The rumors only intensified. Interviews, articles, missing person posters. It was spreading all over town. Putting up posters with Vicky and Braden's faces was surreal. Their eyes seemed to follow me, silently asking where I had been that night. Everyone started asking me questions. My parents, the police, social workers. They all thought I knew something. And I did. About the prank. But I kept that to myself. It felt irrelevant, like a childish joke that had gotten out of hand. So I stayed quiet. But the silence made me a target. Everyone knew I hung out with Braden and the gang. As days turned to weeks, the pressure grew unbearable. Calls flooded in nonstop. I remember one time the newspaper called and I just lost it. "I don't know anything. Maybe the bloodsucker got them. I don't know," I screamed. Big mistake. That only made things worse. I was hauled into the police station for questioning, dragged to the school counselor with my parents, bombarded with calls from reporters and concerned citizens, and some lunatics online. The bloodsucker had become a headline. People don't just vanish without a reason. I stopped going to school. The halls felt suffocating. I imagined whispers following me, shadowy eyes watching from afar. The rumor had swallowed my life whole. I thought about telling the truth. I really did. But after weeks of lying, I couldn't just flip the script overnight. My parents bought me a cheap car so I could drive straight home, but cheap cars break down. One night in late May, it died on me just off the highway. I'd been careless, hanging out with a friend after school, had a few beers, and probably shouldn't have been driving. Anxiety gnawed at me as I pushed the car off the road. It was just after 8 p.m. A storm was brewing. Wind howled, rain pattered against the windshield, and the highway felt empty except for passing cars. I debated whether to call my parents, the police, or roadside assistance. My thumb hovered over my mom's number for minutes. The faint smell of beer on my breath made me hesitate. Then, without warning, a ragged man appeared at my window, wielding a tire iron. As I hit the call button, glass shattered everywhere. Hands reached inside. I kicked and scrambled to the passenger side, bleeding from cuts I didn't even notice. In the chaos, I must have screamed, though I can't remember. My throat was raw when I came to. Panic took over, and I just ran. But before I fled, our eyes met. His were fully white, no pupils, just cold, empty orbs. It felt like he was looking right through me, seeing something I couldn't see in myself. Those eyes haunt me to this day. I ran into the field beside the road, then plunged into the pine forest. My body moved on autopilot, lungs burning, heart pounding. Behind me, I heard rustling and screaming, some angry, some pleading.
"Please, sir, talk to us,"
one cried. They called out, desperate and broken. I found a hollow beneath a pine tree and hid, clutching nothing but fear. I realized I'd dropped my phone inside the smashed car. Hours passed as I listened to them shuffle nearby. One muttered, "Gotta find him. Not too late. Gotta find him." Through the branches, I caught a glimpse of those white eyes. I closed mine, held my breath, praying for it to end. When I finally moved, the sky had darkened, the wind stronger, rain still soft. No screams, no sounds. I stumbled into a small clearing and tripped over something. In the moonlight, I saw it was a man, coughing up blood, gasping for air. It was the one who attacked me. But he wasn't looking at me. He was staring behind me. I turned and froze. 6 headless bodies floated silently in the air, their limbs swaying gently in the breeze. I recognized their clothes, the missing ones from the party, and standing in the middle of the clearing was a man. Sharp suit, impeccably groomed black hair, Mediterranean features, like he didn't belong in this wild place. His eyes locked with mine, and I couldn't breathe. His gaze was ice. He stepped forward, extending a hand that felt freezing to the touch, like ice water seeping through my veins. "You brought too much attention," he said, voice low and dangerous, like hot chocolate scalding your tongue. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Some woodsmen are hunting me," he said, glancing at the bleeding man. "You and your friends brought them here." I stammered excuses, but then the man's form twisted. His skin cracked like porcelain, revealing darkness beneath. His mouth unhinged, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth and long fangs. He grew taller, towering over me. "I don't care for excuses," he growled. His long fingers wrapped around my neck, squeezing. Pain exploded through me. I struggled to nod as he hissed, "You will tell them it was all your doing. You will tell them there is nothing lurking in the dark. You will lie." He threw me down. I gasped for air, tears blurring my vision. Through the haze, I saw him pick up the bleeding man. A sickening crack echoed, the breaking of a neck. Blood poured out like a burst juice box, soaking pale skin and dripping into black eyes. The 6 headless bodies floated as silent witnesses. I turned and ran. The next morning, I lied. I told everyone it was a stupid prank gone wrong. I said I didn't know what happened to Braden and the others. I claimed I walked home that night, that someone broke into my car. I lied about everything, but I couldn't sleep. If I'd missed something, if I'd exposed that thing in any way, I was sure I'd pay with my life. Years have passed. I left that town, that state behind. But sometimes I get strange emails or friend requests, people asking uncomfortable questions. And I still lie. It weighs on me. But I'm just a person, not made to face monsters. Not again. Hey, I want to share with you something that happened to us. Something that still haunts me whenever I think about it. It was supposed to be a fun, special night, celebrating my friend Lindsay's birthday. Lindsay, yeah, I changed her name a bit. She turned 30 right when the pandemic hit, so all the big celebrations were canceled. When we finally could get together again, we wanted to do something memorable, a proper girls' night out, just like old times. Lindsay always had this fascination with the spooky and the eerie. Her birthday's just a week before Halloween, so by then, everything around us would be pumpkin-spiced and draped in fake cobwebs. It was kind of her vibe. Even as a mom of two, she'd still wear skull necklaces or pentagram earrings now and then, a little nod to the gothic side she loved. But organizing the night was tricky. Our schedules were all over the place. Some of us could take the whole weekend off. Others had to be home by midnight or had work early the next day. We kept going back and forth on what to do, until Aggie, another friend, found the perfect thing: an escape room. We all met up on a chilly Saturday evening: me, Dawn, Aggie, and Lindsay. After a fancy dinner and a long, crisp walk, we arrived at this place called the Apostle Collective. They had opened about a year before, and they'd been booked solid all spring. So somehow, snagging a booking near Halloween felt like a stroke of luck. Maybe some of you have heard of them. They've got a few locations, mostly in Minnesota. The place was incredible. Not your average spooky decorations. They had smoke machines, hidden speakers, projectors, the whole immersive experience. The staff were decked out in prosthetics, looking like zombie carnival workers from an old-timey freak show. When we stepped inside, they checked our booking and handed us a little box of free popcorn. Lindsay's face lit up. We'd told them it was her birthday, and they made sure she got some extra attention. She deserved it. Then, as we approached the entrance to the escape room, the staff gave us a little introduction. "You're about to enter the box of the godless grinning witch," they said in this eerie tone. "This is our longest and scariest room yet. It's practically brand new, except for some playtesters. You're lucky to get in. The previous group canceled last minute. Inside, you'll find everything you need to solve the puzzles. Just don't break any furniture or try to move anything bolted down. None of the clues require force, so don't worry about hurting yourselves." Dawn piped up, "Are there actors? Can you tell us?" The staff member smiled tightly. "I could, but I won't. Just remember, whatever happens, you won't be harmed. Something might reach for you, chase you, or touch you, but no harm will come to you. Please keep that in mind." Aggie asked nervously, Is the door open? Can we leave at any time?" "Just knock or send us a text. The door locks automatically, but we can open it remotely with a click of a button." Lindsay couldn't contain herself and interrupted. "So what's the story? Ghouls? Ghosts? Vampires?" I was thrilled to see her this excited. She was practically bouncing. The game's premise was that a cruel witch trapped 4 souls inside a tiny box. As the souls scramble to escape, they realize they're not alone. Monstrous beings lurk inside, hunting them. That was it. No spoilers, no extra hints. We were to enter knowing only that we'd been captured and were not alone. Aggie kept her phone for texting hints or contacting staff if we needed. The rest of us put ours away. This was supposed to be intense. The average solve time was about 4 hours. We were allowed to stay until midnight, and if we solved it without hints, there was a special prize. We could also text to pause the game for bathroom breaks. We hung up our coats, Dawn stretched, and Lindsay was visibly shaking with excitement. This was going to be great. I was the last to step inside. As the door shut behind me, I noticed the staff member glance sideways, their brow furrowing before they stepped back. Then, in a blink, they vanished. The door slammed shut hard. Something felt off, but I didn't want to alarm anyone. They were so excited, and the game was just beginning. Inside, the room was pitch black, windowless. Lindsay was chatty, trying to mask her nerves, but Dawn and Aggie exchanged uneasy looks, clearly wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. Then, a chilling laugh echoed, followed by a sudden light. A projector on the ceiling flickered on, filling the entire room. We looked up to see the image of an impossibly large woman looming over us, like we were tiny toys in her hand. Her eyes were sunken and joyless, but her grin stretched impossibly wide, ear to ear. It was clearly CGI, but the effect was impressive. Above her, A full moon shone. "I think she's based on a local legend," Aggie whispered. "Some kind of pilgrim myth. I've heard about it." As the grinning witch's hand passed over us, the room plunged into darkness again, electric torches flaring to life along the walls. The game had officially started. The room was filled with all the classic escape room trappings: paintings, rugs, chests, tables inscribed with strange runes. We scattered, eager to find clues. Aggie found a pamphlet and started calling out names. Dawn discovered a series of numbers under a chair. Lindsay soaked in the atmosphere, searching paintings for hidden hints. About 30 minutes in, a terrifying sound echoed. Rattling cages, snapping metal, a low moan, and heavy footsteps approaching. We all darted for hiding spots. The room had a few obvious ones. Lindsay was giggling nervously, but my heart was pounding. Yet, nothing happened. The noises faded as if they were just a recording, but there was this odd disconnect, like the footsteps were supposed to transition from recorded to real, but no one appeared. We waited in silence, then cautiously emerged. "Did we miss something?" Dawn asked, glancing around. There was an awkward silence. Nothing stirred. Strange. We made solid progress, found keys that opened a chest, revealing a black light disguised as a candle. Using it, we uncovered coded runes and discovered a touchpad hidden behind a painting. Entering the right code opened a small side room full of clues. Things were clicking. Then the strange noises returned, rattling chains, moans, pounding steps. We hurried back to hiding spots, convinced this time something would happen. But again, nothing. The voice from the ceiling whispered, "I think he likes you." "Like hell he does," Aggie muttered. "He's not coming out." "Relatable," Dawn said, standing. "I'm using the bathroom. Text them." Aggie sent a message to the staff as Dawn tried the door. Locked. "No response," Aggie frowned. Dawn knocked. Silence. "Still nothing," Aggie said, holding up her phone. A sick feeling twisted in my stomach. Something was wrong. Dawn's cheerful smile faded. Lindsay's energy drained. "Is this part of it?" Lindsay asked uneasily. "Are you in on this?" "No," I said quickly. "It's probably just an auto-lock glitch or something. No big deal." But no one answered. Aggie tried calling Hank, her husband, but no pickup. I pressed my ear against the wall, hoping to hear staff chatter nearby, but silence. There were supposed to be actors or staff just outside. This didn't add up. Then, I heard footsteps. Heavy, real footsteps, not recorded. I motioned for quiet. There was a small opening in the wall, a door perhaps. Someone was coming. "Is that them?" Dawn whispered. The steps were large and heavy. None of us knew what to do, but we all agreed this felt wrong. Dawn hissed, "Hide!" We scrambled to the best places. Lindsay and I squeezed into the little side room and shut the door, holding our breath. Dawn squeezed inside a chest, and Aggie hid behind a curtain at the back. The dim light might help. The doors slid open with a creak. Heavy breathing, dragging feet, and a wet snorting sound filled the room. Something sharp scraped the floor. "Please pick the small one first, Byron," a hoarse voice wheezed. A pig-like screech replied. This wasn't pre-recorded. Someone was really there. Something big. Then, tearing fabric, followed by a scream. An awful, drawn-out scream of terror and pleading. Someone was being dragged out. I couldn't tell who. Then, silence. The door shut. We peeked out. The curtain Aggie had hidden behind was torn down. She was gone. Blood smeared the floor. We found Dawn curled up inside the chest, trembling, her eyes wild, barely breathing. When we tried to reach her, she screamed and clawed at us. She saw something, but we couldn't get through. "What did you see?" Lindsay whispered. Dawn shook her head, lost. I'm not waiting for that to come back, Lindsay said firmly. Help me turn off the lights. The lights? I shivered. It can't find us in the dark, Lindsay said. One by one, we extinguished the torches. Darkness swallowed the room. We crouched near Dawn, trying to calm her. This is part of it, right? Dawn whispered. Is Aggie in on this? Are you messing with me? No, I whispered. Something's wrong. Bullshit, Lindsay snapped. Who has the phone? All eyes on Aggie. There has to be something, Lindsay demanded. Try to find anything. What? Where? I was panicked. I don't know. Just try. I felt along the doorframe and found 2 cables, maybe for lights. Then a thought hit me. Maybe the door unlocks when we solve it, I said. Won't work, Lindsay sighed. Some clues need staff to open them manually, but I don't think anyone's out there anymore. What about fire escapes? You can't just lock people in. Lindsay sank to the floor. This is a mistake. Suddenly, the side door slammed open. Heavy footsteps filled the room again. Even in the dark, we knew something huge was here, smelling of earth and dampness. That scraping noise returned. Byron, get another one, the hoarse voice laughed. Lindsay and I pressed ourselves against the wall, holding hands tight. Dawn was panicking. No, she coughed. No, no, no. A loud snort. The scraping lifted off the floor. We heard a heavy thud as Dawn was thrown down. She tried to speak but couldn't. Then, a horrible sound, something heavy falling on her and then being dragged away. Her scream was raw and terrifying. The door slammed again. Lindsay sobbed nearby. I was frozen, muscles stiff. Time stretched, probably only minutes, but felt like hours. Finally, Lindsay stood, flipped a table on its side, broke off the legs, and handed me one. Don't just let them, okay? She said. Okay, I nodded, trembling. My hands were slick with sweat, slipping on the wood. I didn't know if I could fight whatever was hunting us. Maybe barricade the door, Lindsay suggested. Then, faster footsteps approached. The thing entered alone this time. No guiding voice. Lindsay and I pressed against the wall, heartbeats pounding. It sniffed, munched, and grunted as it searched. After a few tense minutes, it left. Then, the projector flickered on again. The grinning witch's giant form filled the ceiling. The room lit up. The creature was massive, at least 6'8", wearing a torn varsity jacket and mud-covered jeans, patches of black fur poking through the holes. It looked like a scarecrow stuffed with wild animal parts. Its head was a boar's, with wet snout and sharp teeth. Its small, dark eyes locked onto me, glowing with violent joy, like a kid about to open a birthday present. It screamed, a pig-like shriek, and charged. I stumbled, nearly falling, but Lindsay kept hold of my hand as we scrambled to the other side of the room. Still down there, playthings? The voice from above mocked. Will you not give up? The light shifted with the video. When the witch appeared fully, the room dimmed. When she retreated, the full moon shone. He'll get you, playthings, the voice sneered. It is so futile. Fresh blood stained the creature's jacket. As the video ended, we'd circled the room and were back at the door. The creature charged straight at us. At the last moment, Lindsay let go, and we dove aside. The boar man crashed into the door, pounding, tearing, biting, roaring in frustration and hunger. It didn't take long to break through. The sudden flood of light from outside scared it, and it fled down the hallway. Lindsay and I stayed down a moment to catch our breath, then crawled out, ready to run. Bloodied handprints smeared the walls. A severed fingernail was stuck to the ceiling. We ignored it all, sprinting for the exit. Come on, come on. I'd sprained my ankle. Lindsay was bleeding from a cut on her hand. About 40 feet from safety, we heard that terrifying voice again. "Tell them," it screamed. "No carnival games in the name of her ladyship. Tell them to fear. Tell them all. Fear the grinning witch." The laughter echoed behind us as Lindsay pulled me forward. No time to look back. We burst through the doors into the cool night air. The laughter faded, but the terror stayed with us. Writing this down feels strange, like recounting someone else's nightmare. But Lindsay is real as when I last saw her, and I don't think any of us will ever fully heal. I still catch myself freezing at random sounds, listening for footsteps. Lindsay's developed a deep claustrophobia. No more locked doors for her, ever. The police called it an armed robbery. Security footage showed 4 intruders entering through the back door, 3 hooded figures, and a large masked man in a varsity jacket. The case was handed to a special unit, which was promptly dropped. No updates. No kidnappings were filed. Dawn, Aggie, and the staff vanished without a trace. No witnesses, no getaway vehicle. They just disappeared. The Grinning Witch is a local legend about a witch who collected cursed animals and souls in a box. The escape room barely touched on it, just a loose inspiration. But somehow, it attracted something dark. A hate sect, maybe. But that man with the boar head, no mask, wet snout, real teeth, that wasn't human. No matter how I try to explain it, I can't shake the image. I don't think this will ever be solved. Things like this don't just happen. But this time, they did. Hey, I want to share something that happened to me recently. Something that's been truly unsettling. So, I live in this old place. It's one of those vintage houses that was converted into a rental. It has that creaky charm, you know? But ever since I moved in, there's been this odd vibe. At first, it was just noises. You might think it's the usual old house stuff. Floorboards settling, pipes groaning. I tried to convince myself that's all it was. But here's the thing. Whenever I have friends over, they always get this uneasy look when they hear the noises. They'll ask me, "How can you feel safe here by yourself?" And I just smile and say, "I guess I'm just used to it." But honestly, it's been creeping me out more than I care to admit. Then, I brought my cat Luna over from my parents' place. Now, I know cats can be quirky, but Luna started acting really strange. She'd just stare, wide-eyed, into the dark corners of the rooms, like she was seeing something I couldn't. At first, I thought it was just her usual oddness, but then she started waking me up. I'd lie down on the couch for a quick nap, and I'd wake up to her meowing softly, staring right behind me with this wild, frightened look. Okay, before I go further, I want to say I've experienced sleep paralysis before. I know what that's like. But what I'm about to tell you, I was wide awake. I could move. I wasn't frozen or anything. The first time it happened, Luna woke me up early one morning when I was trying to catch some sleep before work. I opened my eyes and saw writing all over the walls. It was like someone had scribbled in every direction, but I couldn't make out a single word. Just lines and shapes swirling around. I blinked a few times, and then, just like that, it faded away. I was too shaken, so I ended up sleeping on the couch that night. Then, last night, something else happened. I sometimes struggle with insomnia, so I was lying in bed, eyes closed, trying to drift off when I suddenly felt this pressure at the foot of my bed. My first thought was, it's Luna, just hopping on to curl up. But when I looked down, there was nothing there. The pressure was still there though, like a hand resting lightly on the bed. I slid my leg under the spot, moving it around, and it felt like I was sliding my leg under a hand, not something pushing down. When I shook my leg, the pressure lifted like someone had just pulled their hand away. I live with my partner, by the way. They haven't experienced any of this, probably because they're usually engrossed in video games and chatting with friends all day, not paying attention to the subtle weirdness around us. Now, I want to tell you about another night, one that still sends shivers down my spine. I'm a woman living out here in Arizona, a place with a reputation for paranormal stories, strange lights, and all sorts of eerie happenings. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal myself, had a few small encounters, but nothing like what went down recently. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I just dropped off a friend at his place out in the middle of nowhere, after a day filled with gaming and watching some classic horror movies. The whole day had been rainy, and the sky was still heavy with dark clouds, blocking out the moonlight. If you've ever driven around here at night, you know how dark it gets. Pitch black, like the kind of night where you can barely see your own hands. I was driving down this stretch of road, well lit but deserted, and suddenly, I got this feeling. Not quite a chill, more like a deep, instinctual nope crawling up my neck. Then I saw this strange blue light bathing the street ahead of me. It looked out of place, unnatural, especially against the sickly yellow glow of the street lamps. As I passed under the light, it just went out. And then, out of nowhere, a huge shadow silently swept across the road in front of me. My heart jumped. I was already on edge, and this just pushed me over the edge. I finally reached the highway, where I had the choice to take a back road that was under heavy construction or head straight home via the highway. I chose the highway. Back roads with construction at night? No thank you. Then this smaller truck starts tailgating me hard, like riding my bumper. In Arizona, people drive fast and close, so I didn't think much of it at first. But then, every time I signaled to change lanes or take a turn, the truck would do the exact same thing moments later. It followed me onto the highway, then matched every turn I made, right, left, merging lanes, always close behind, always signaling just after me. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just aggressive driving. It felt deliberate, like I was being followed. I remembered hearing that if you make 3 consecutive turns in the same direction, you can see if someone's tailing you, because you'll circle back around. So I pretended to turn into the back entrance of a nearby strip mall. The truck whipped past me, and I took a deep breath, then turned back up the road towards my house. I was determined to get his license plate number, just in case. I repeated the numbers over and over in my head, whispering them in the quiet of my truck's cab, trying to keep calm. I watched the truck turn off onto another street, and once I was sure he was gone, I checked my rear view to make sure he wasn't back behind me. Thankfully, he wasn't. I was only a few miles from home, but the sense of unease was creeping in deeper. When I finally got home, I kept my keys tight in my hand, finger resting on the panic button of my car remote. If you don't know, that button can save your life, set off the alarm, attract attention, and scare off anyone getting too close. I was ready. But then, just as I was about to head inside, I realized I'd forgotten to take the trash cans to the curb. It was midnight, pitch dark, and as I dragged them down the driveway, the silence was suffocating. No crickets, no birds, no bats, just this heavy, eerie quiet. Then, out of the corner of my eye, near the open desert at the end of the street, I saw him. A tall, pale figure standing just beyond the reach of a neighbor's garage light. No face to speak of, just this lanky, ghostly silhouette, motionless and staring. My heart hammered as my dog suddenly barked furiously, breaking the silence. I didn't wait. I sprinted inside, slammed the door, and watched the garage door close behind me. I've been hearing scratches on my bedroom window ever since, but I'm too scared to peek through the blinds. What if whatever's out there is waiting for me to look? Right now, I'm sitting here with a blade by my bed, hoping, praying, that I make it through the night safe. Whatever this is, it's real, and it's watching. I want to share with you the absolute creepiest night I've ever had out here in Arizona. Now, if you're familiar with the Southwest, you probably know that the nights can get incredibly dark. Like, no stars, no moon, just this heavy, all-consuming darkness that feels like it's swallowing everything whole. And Arizona, well, it's a hot spot for all sorts of strange tales. Paranormal stuff, UFO sightings, weird vibes, you name it. I've always been fascinated by the paranormal myself, and I've had my share of minor weird experiences, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened just an hour ago. So, picture this. It's about 11:30 p.m., and I've just dropped off my buddy, let's call him Mike, at his place. His house is way out in the middle of nowhere, the kind of place where the silence is almost deafening. We'd spent the day hanging out, playing video games, and watching one of my favorite horror movies, which probably didn't help my nerves. The sky had been cloaked in thick, dark clouds all day from the rain, and those clouds were still hanging around, blocking any moonlight from piercing through. The road I was driving on was slick and slippery from the rain, and honestly, my truck's headlights aren't the strongest, so visibility was pretty rough. I was driving down this deserted stretch of road. It's usually pretty well lit, but tonight, the streetlights gave off this sickly yellow glow that just didn't feel right. Then, out of nowhere, this strange feeling crept up the back of my neck. It wasn't exactly a chill, more like this instinctive, gut-wrenching sensation of nope. Right as that feeling hit, I noticed this odd blue light shining down on the street just ahead of me. It was so weird because it didn't match the rest of the streetlights at all. As soon as I drove under that blue light, it flickered off, and I caught sight of a massive shadow passing silently right across the road in front of me. My heart started pounding. This was way too much for my already jumpy self. I kept driving, adrenaline kicking in, until I finally reached the highway. I had two choices: take a back road that was under heavy construction, or stick to the highway and head home the normal way. Of course, I chose the highway. The back road seemed like a trap. Dark, deserted, and messy with construction equipment everywhere. Almost immediately, this smaller pickup truck started tailgating me hard, like literally riding my bumper. Now, around here, it's normal for people to speed or tailgate, so at first, I tried to brush it off. But then things started getting weird. I signaled to take my turn, and so did this guy, right after me. Then, at the next turn, which was a left, he did the exact same thing. Every time I changed lanes, he mirrored me, staying way too close, always signaling just a second after I did. My heart was hammering by this point, and all the stories I'd heard about people being followed flooded into my mind. I started thinking about how to handle this without leading him straight to my house. Then it hit me. If I make 3 turns in the same direction, it'll form a circle. If he's still following me after that, I'll know for sure. So, I pretended to turn into the back entrance of a strip mall near my house. As I stopped at the right turn lane, the truck sped past me. I took a deep breath, then turned around and headed back up the road toward my place. I was determined to catch his license plate, just in case. I repeated those numbers over and over in my head, and even whispered them out loud in the silence of my truck's cab. Being the one following him instead of the other way around gave me a sliver of control, and that helped calm me down a bit. I watched the truck take a turn off onto a side street, and once I was sure he was gone, I checked my rearview mirror repeatedly. No sign of him. But even though I was close to home, my skin was crawling, and the hairs on my arms were standing up. The quiet around me felt heavy, like the night itself was holding its breath. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I made sure to look around carefully before I got out. My hand gripped my keys tightly, finger hovering over the panic button. For anyone who hasn't used this trick, the panic button on your car's key fob can be a lifesaver. If someone gets too close when you're alone, just hold it down and the alarm will scream, attracting everyone's attention and scaring off whoever's lurking nearby. I hurried inside, breathing a little easier once the door slammed shut behind me. But then, just as I was about to head to my bedroom, I remembered. I hadn't taken the trash cans out to the curb yet. It was midnight, pitch black outside, and the silence was suffocating. No crickets chirping, no birds fluttering, not even bats darting through the air. It was like the desert itself had gone completely still. I grabbed the trash cans and started dragging them down the driveway, every sound amplified in the darkness. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A tall, pale figure standing just beyond the glow of my neighbor's garage light, near the open desert at the end of the street. This figure was impossibly lanky and pale, with no clear facial features, just a shadowy, eerie presence that made my blood run cold. My dog, who had been quiet until then, suddenly started barking wildly. That sound jolted me into action. I sprinted back inside, heart racing, slammed the garage door shut, and locked it tight. I made a beeline for my bedroom, but even here, I wasn't safe. There were faint scratches against my bedroom window, slow and deliberate, like something was trying to get in. I'm too scared to even open the blinds and look out. What if whatever is out there waits until I do? Right now, I've got a blade next to my bed, and I'm not taking any more chances tonight. So here I am, hoping to make it through the rest of this night, listening to the scratching outside, praying for the morning light to come. This night, this whole experience, it's unlike anything I've ever felt before. A reminder that sometimes the darkest nights hold the most terrifying secrets. I want to share a session story with you because it reflects something I have witnessed many times. Sometimes the body has physical symptoms, absolutely, and I want to be very clear about this. I am not saying, do not see a doctor. Please do not take it that way. What I mean is that sometimes a doctor looks at one layer and the higher self reveals another layer underneath it. Emotional, ancestral, spiritual, energetic. Sometimes the body is speaking in more than one language. The woman in this story, I will call her Alina, came for a soul session. That is not her real name. She was in her early 50s and lived in Portugal. For years, she had been exhausted. Not just ordinary tired, not the kind of tired that a good night of sleep can fix. She said she could sleep for hours and still wake up feeling hollow, as if her energy had leaked out somewhere during the night. She also had a burning sensation in her stomach. Acid, reflux, heat rising through her body. She had tried changing her diet, taking medication, adjusting habits, all the usual things. Some helped a little, but nothing really reached the deeper heaviness she felt. Her eyesight had also been getting worse. A doctor had suggested surgery. On the outside, she agreed, but inside, something felt unsettled. Not fear exactly, more like her body was quietly saying, "Wait, something is missing here." During the session, once she went into deep trance, her higher self first took her to a foggy forest path near an old stone doorway. From there, we began scanning her body slowly, from the top of her head down to her feet. When we reached her eyes, there was a strange flickering movement. It looked like flashes of white light, almost like a tiny lens moving back and forth. The answer came that Alina had inner sight, but she had been using it in a distorted way. She was always looking outward, trying to understand everything outside herself, trying to read other people, situations, signs, dangers, possibilities. But she was not turning that seeing inward. Her gift had become reversed, and the eyes were carrying pressure from that. Then we moved to the stomach. That was where the session opened completely. There were 7 attached spirits connected to her body. The first one came forward through the stomach. It was her grandmother, Rosina. Rosina had been with Alina since Alina was a baby. When the guide asked why she was there, Rosina said, "She is mine. She is my little one. I have no one else here." And it was not evil. It was not threatening. It was deeply sad. She was lonely, confused, and attached. Rosina did not truly understand that she could leave. She did not understand that her life had ended in the way the soul needs to understand it. She believed no one was waiting for her. The guide asked her to look within herself and find her own spark of light. At first, she said, "There is nobody there." The guide gently told her that this was a false belief. No soul is truly alone. Soul family is always near, even when we forget, even when grief makes the world feel empty. Then Rosina softened. She said she had never told Alina how much she loved her, so she told her there, in the session. And after that, her form began to break into tiny sparks of light. She released from the stomach and went home. The next spirit was more difficult. His name was Josan. When he came forward, the first thing he said was, "Alina should not be here. There is no need for Alina in this world." And honestly, when something like that comes through, you pause. The higher self showed that Josan had been Alina's father in another lifetime. In that life, she was a little girl, around 7 years old. He was in his 30s. During a violent uprising, men came and took her away. He could not protect her. He carried unbearable guilt. Later, he ended his own life by setting fire to his home. But he was not truly angry at Alina. He was trapped inside guilt and helplessness. That pain had hardened into something dark and twisted. The guide took him back to the moment where he felt powerless. He was helped to feel what he had never been able to process. As he did, the dark cloud around him began to loosen. 2 beings of light came forward. Then he saw his wife and his daughter waiting for him, and he went with them. After that came Bernal, Alina's grandfather. He had died years earlier in his late 70s. He had been attached for longer than Alina had even been alive. He was lost too, but in a different way. Alina hugged him during the session and gave him permission to go. She told him, "Your mother needs you now more than I do." And he left. After only 3 of the 7 spirits were released, we asked what Rosina's presence in the stomach had caused. The answer came like a list: diarrhea, constipation, acidity, reflux, no energy, low vibration, heavy body. Again, I am not saying this was only spiritual and not physical, but in that session, the deeper layer beneath the stomach burning was very clear. It was connected to a grandmother who loved her, but had never fully left. There were still 4 spirits remaining after that, all very traumatized. So it was not a neat little story where everything was solved in one moment. It was layered. The body had been carrying a whole hidden attic of pain. The eye surgery also came up. The higher self did not say, "Never do it." It said the procedure needed to change. A different machine, a different doctor, a different approach. And Alina would know when the right moment came, but only if she became quiet enough to listen. What stayed with me from that session is how much the body can hold. Sometimes tiredness is not only tiredness. Sometimes stomach fire is not only stomach fire. Sometimes weakening eyesight is not only about the eyes. The body can carry grief, family attachment, other life trauma, spirits who never crossed, beliefs, guilt, energies that do not even belong to us. And I think many people do not know what is sitting in their field until they go deep enough. They think, "This is my anxiety, this is my stomach, this is my depression, this is my bad luck." Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Sometimes it is many layers braided together. So please be gentle with yourself. Use doctors. Use therapists. Use practical support. Take care of the physical body. But also remember that the spiritual and physical layers can exist at the same time. The body may be asking for medicine, and sometimes, quietly, it may also be asking for release. So, for years, I kept this story tucked away as a little campfire tale. You know, the kind you tell with a half smile like, well, it was probably just the lighting. And honestly, that's what I believed for a long time. Back in 2019, my friend Nora and I were suddenly put in charge of a 5-day activity program for a group of 12 young adults, all around 18 to 26 from our youth organization. We were barely older than them ourselves, so we were very much figuring it out as we went. The program was in Canberra, Australia, and the group had asked for science-focused activities. Somehow, Nora and I pulled together a pretty solid schedule. We took them to the Dinosaur Museum, got them into a few lab spaces, did the usual Canberra things, including Questacon. But we had only been handed the whole event about a month before it started, and these participants had paid a lot of money to be there, so we were scrambling a bit. I've always loved creepy stories, and since Canberra has plenty of old government buildings with ghost rumors attached to them, I jokingly suggested we do a ghost tour at Old Parliament House on the final night. To my surprise, the group loved the idea. So, off we went. Old Parliament House opened in 1927 and served as Australia's parliament until 1988, when the current Parliament House replaced it. Now it's a museum. A lot of the buildings in that central government district have haunting stories attached to them. Most are the usual sort of thing. Footsteps after closing, strange sounds, shadows where shadows shouldn't be. Nothing too dramatic, at least not on paper. When we arrived for the tour, my group made up about half the people there. And by that point in the week, I knew them well enough to know they were exactly the sort of people who might correct a tour guide, wander off, or touch something interesting simply because nobody had specifically told them not to. So I was in full shepherd mode. The tour took us through the foyer first, where the guide talked about ghostly footsteps and the history of the building. Then we went into one of the chambers. The lights were off, apart from exit signs and these little electric candles that gave everything a slightly theatrical glow. Because I was watching the group, I filed in last and sat toward the back. The chamber had rows of seats arranged in a kind of curved shape on the ground floor, with balconies above for the public, media, staffers, and so on. We were seated below. The whole time the guide was talking, I was only half listening. I was mostly counting heads, making sure nobody had drifted away into the dark like an adventurous raccoon. And then, I noticed something. Out of the corner of my eye, I kept seeing what looked like a man standing in the shadows beneath one of the balconies, near a doorway. Not clearly. Not enough to point and say, there he is. More like a shape my brain kept catching before I looked directly at it. Every time I turned my head, there was nothing there. So I told myself it was just the exit sign, or the angle of the balcony, or the way the dark gathered in that particular corner of the room. A trick of the light. Nothing more. But it kept happening. Again and again, that same shape. A man leaning there in the shadows. Eventually, the guide finished in that room and started moving everyone along. One person from my group stayed behind to talk to the second guide, which did not surprise me at all. She was usually the first to raise her hand with a correction or a question. Another person from the public stayed behind too. I braced myself because I thought, here we go. Someone's about to start a very intense conversation. The stranger was very polite and said to the guide, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have to say something. I'm sensitive to these things, and there's something in this room. At that point, I thought my group member was going to have an absolute field day with it. But instead, she said, "Yes, me too. That's why I stayed behind. There's a man." The stranger immediately said, "Yes, there is. And he was standing," and my group member finished the sentence, "right there." And both of them pointed to the exact spot where I had been seeing that figure all night. That used to be where I ended the story. A strange coincidence. 3 people, all in different parts of the room, all seeing or sensing the same man-shaped shadow. Still, I told myself there had to be some architectural reason for it. Maybe the balcony cast a certain shape. Maybe the lighting made that corner look human. For years, that explanation was enough. Then, much later, a video about ghost stories at Old Parliament House came up in my feed. I watched it mostly because I was bored, and because I've always had a soft spot for strange little Canberra stories. Most of the video was the usual stuff: old building sounds, echoes, pipes, footsteps, the kind of thing people always talk about in historic places. But near the end, they mentioned a haunting I had never heard before. Apparently, people had reported seeing a man standing in the House of Representatives chamber. And suddenly, that little campfire story didn't feel quite so little anymore. I guess I should start by saying this happened when I was pretty young, around 10 or 11. My little brother Milo was maybe 7 or 8 at the time, and we were living with my mom in a house right behind a Catholic church. The church had been there for years, but we didn't know much about it back then. To us, it was just the building behind our backyard. Later, I found out it had once been a convent, a place where nuns had lived. Things started not long after my mom's boyfriend moved in. He wasn't exactly a kind person, and the house felt different once he was there. He brought this heavy feeling with him, like the air had gotten thicker. About a month after he moved in, my brother and I started hearing things at night. It usually happened right before we fell asleep. 3 or 4 nights a week, we would hear a woman's voice. Sometimes it sounded like she was saying, "Sleep." Other times, it sounded more like, "Soul." But most often, it was just a gentle hush, like someone trying to calm us down. The strange thing is, we weren't really scared of it at first. I know that probably sounds odd, but it didn't feel threatening. It felt soft, almost comforting, like someone was trying to settle the house down. Around that same time, Milo started sleepwalking. It happened often enough that I got used to waking up and checking on him. A lot of nights, I would find him standing in the dining room or the kitchen, facing the big window that looked out toward the backyard and the church beyond it. He would just stand there, completely still, staring outside. That went on for a couple of months. Then one day, a friend of mine, Carson, who went to Sunday service at that church, told me it used to be where nuns lived. I didn't even know the word for it at the time. Later, I learned it was called a convent. That was when I started getting curious. After school one afternoon, Carson and I went to his house and asked his parents what they knew about the church. Most of what they told us was ordinary history, dates and renovations and things like that. But one part stuck with me. They said that sometime in the early 2000s, old graves connected to the convent had been moved so the church could make room for a school. That was the moment everything began to feel different. After that, I started paying closer attention when Milo would sleepwalk. I would follow him quietly and try to see what he was staring at through the window. Every time, his gaze seemed fixed on the same place, the statue of the Virgin Mary near the church grounds. Then one night, I saw something there. It looked like a nun standing beside the statue. She was dressed in black, completely still. But the part I'll never forget is that she didn't have a face. Not a shadowed face. Not a blurry face. Just nothing where a face should have been. I remember freezing. My whole body went cold. Whatever comfort I had felt from the voice before disappeared in that instant. A few days later, I finally told my mom. That was when she told me she had been experiencing things too. She said she had started having sleep paralysis at night. During it, she would see a woman in black standing nearby. A woman with no face. Then she told me something even stranger. Her boyfriend had been waking up with bruises and bite marks on his arms and legs. He didn't know where they were coming from, and nobody in the house could explain them. The strangest part is what happened after he finally left. He didn't leave on good terms, and I remember the whole house feeling tense for a while. But almost immediately after he was gone, the activity stopped. The voices faded. Milo stopped sleepwalking as much. My mom's sleep paralysis eased up. It was like whatever had been there didn't care about us. Or maybe it had been trying to protect us. I don't know. I still don't have a clean answer for any of it. This all happened about 20 years ago, and for a long time I didn't think about it much. But recently, I moved back into that house temporarily while I was transferring my things from my old apartment to a new place. Being there again brought it all back. The window, the church, the statue in the yard, and that strange year when something faceless seemed to be watching from the edge of the dark. I should probably start by explaining what the area around my house is like, because it matters. I don't live out in the middle of nowhere or anything, but my house sits close to this narrow little river that separates my street from the one behind it. There hasn't been a proper bridge there in years, and parts of the riverbank are crowded with trees, weeds, and thick patches of bamboo. There are plenty of houses around mine, so it's not isolated, but at night the whole place gets very quiet. Usually, the only things you hear are dogs barking, either from our yard or from the neighbors' houses. Around that time, though, the dog we kept outside had died, so the only dog left was one that stayed inside my aunt's house next door. When I was a teenager, I used to stay awake really late. Sometimes I'd be watching shows, sometimes reading, sometimes just scrolling on my phone. I had school in the afternoon, so I could sleep in a bit, and I took full advantage of that. One night, it was probably around 2 or 3 in the morning, and I was in my room with the lights on, just scrolling through my phone. Then I started hearing something outside. It sounded like a woman crying. At first, it was kind of far away, somewhere beyond my house, maybe closer to the river or the next street over. Then I heard her scream, "Help me!" I froze. I didn't immediately do anything, partly because I sometimes hear things at night and later realize it was probably nothing. But this didn't fade away. It got closer. The crying was messy and breathless, like she was running or struggling to catch air. She just kept sobbing and screaming, "Help me!" over and over. Not, "Call the police," not anything specific, just that. My first instinct was to turn off my bedroom light. I messaged a friend and told them what I was hearing because I didn't want to feel completely alone with it. Then I heard the gate outside my house move. That sound made my stomach drop. The crying came closer until it was right beneath my window. My room was on the second floor, and I remember sitting there in the dark, barely moving, with this horrible feeling that something was very wrong. Thankfully, most of the windows in our rooms had blackout glass or heavy curtains, so I didn't think anyone outside could see me clearly. After a while, the voice moved away again. I could still hear her crying and calling for help, but it slowly drifted off into the night. The next morning, I told my grandmother and my aunt what had happened. They both said they hadn't heard anything. No crying, no screaming, no gate, nothing. So I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Then it happened again the next night. As soon as I heard that same crying voice coming closer, I panicked and turned off my light. This time, it sounded like she was walking around my house. I could hear her outside, moving slowly around the yard, crying in that same exhausted, desperate way. And the strangest part was the silence. Not one dog barked. Not ours, not the neighbors' dogs, none of them. Every other night, a leaf could fall wrong and at least one dog would start barking. But whenever that woman's voice came into my yard, everything went completely still. This went on for maybe 2 or 3 months. Not every single night, but enough that I started dreading being awake late. Some nights I'd force myself to sleep earlier just so I wouldn't hear her. I didn't want to sit in the dark again, listening to someone cry under my window. There were 2 times when the voice sounded farther from the house, and I worked up the courage to open my window. I wanted to make sure I was really hearing it. I even recorded it once on my phone, but I don't have that recording anymore. That phone broke years ago, and I replaced it. Eventually, it stopped. I still live in the same house, and nothing like that has happened again. But I also don't stay up that late anymore. For a long time, I didn't think about it much. Then today, the memory came back out of nowhere, and I can still remember how that voice sounded. I don't know what it was. Where I live, we don't really have stories about things like skinwalkers, mimics, or anything like that. So I've never had a clear explanation for it. But whatever was outside my house those nights, I know what I heard. I want to share something that has stayed with me for years, and I hope you'll hear me with an open heart. When I was 22, about 13 years ago, I had a very close guy friend named Rivan. He had a girlfriend, but we would still spend time together around our neighborhood, talking, hanging out, and sometimes noticing other girls nearby. Even then, I had this strange, uneasy feeling about him. I could never fully explain it. It was just there. One day, we had a fight. I think I had become too available in his life, too present, and his family started making jokes about me. That hurt me more than I admitted at the time. I said some things in anger, and after that, I stopped speaking to him. He tried to apologize through a mutual friend, but I wasn't ready to accept it. 13 months later, he passed away. Years after that, in 2018, I was giving tuition to 3 children and also to a younger cousin. Their father gave me the same kind of heavy, uncomfortable feeling. I noticed it, but I ignored it because I needed the money, and I didn't want to sound strange by bringing up anything that felt too spiritual or paranormal. Within a year, he also died. There was another time when I told someone that their brain tumor would improve on a certain date. I don't even know why I said that date. It just came to me. And I swear, on that exact day, they started getting better. They were no longer bedridden. When I was a child, there was a girl who bullied me. I never fought back, but deep inside, I always carried this knowing, this feeling I couldn't name. Later, I heard from a mutual friend that she had died too. A family member of mine once passed away with no husband, no children, and almost nothing left behind. Before she died, I met her, and she said something I have never forgotten. She told me, "Everything you say about anyone will become true." That sentence has followed me like a shadow. A couple of years after COVID, I fell from my scooter and injured my chest. Later, a cousin, whom I'll call Armin, came to my house to attack me after a verbal argument turned ugly. Since then, it has been 2 or 3 years, and I have been avoiding surgery because of swelling in my chest. This year, I prayed to God for a tuition job so I could pay my bills. And strangely, after 8 years, I finally got one. But the truth is, I have also been cursing Armin quietly in my heart every day. And now I feel scared. If something happens to him, what am I supposed to think? Are all these things just coincidences? Or is there some kind of energy around me that I don't understand? I'm not saying I know the answer. I'm just trying to make sense of it all, respectfully and honestly. It started when I was about 7 years old. I had a counselor back then named Elena, and at the time, she was pregnant. I remember she was pretty far along, maybe 6 or 7 months. One night, I had this dream that has never really left me. In the dream, I saw her baby lying in a crib, or maybe it was a bassinet. I was standing there looking at this baby, and the baby wasn't moving. Then Elena came running into the room, screaming that her baby wasn't breathing. I woke up shaken. A couple days later, I had a session with her, and I really didn't want to talk. I couldn't stop thinking about that dream. She noticed something was wrong and asked me if I was okay. I told her I was fine, but she kept gently asking, so finally, I told her what I had dreamed. She reassured me right away. She told me the baby was healthy and that everything was okay. A few weeks later, she had her baby. From what I remember, she brought the baby home, and about a week later, the baby passed away from SIDS. Later, Elena came back to collect her things. I saw her, and she looked completely broken. I remember her telling me to stay away from her. After that, I never saw her again. That experience scared me deeply because I was just a child. I didn't understand how I could dream something like that before it happened. Then, when I was 22, I had another dream. In that dream, 2 little girls were sitting in my kitchen asking me about my brother, Mason. He was still alive at the time. I remember telling them, Uncle Mason passed away from a drug overdose. I wish I could remember more of that dream, but that's all that stayed with me. When I was 25, my brother passed away from a drug overdose after taking a fake Xanax. I'm 33 now, and I have 2 little girls. Another thing happened last April with my mom. She had been sick for a long time and had several illnesses, but for a while she had actually been doing pretty well. She had gone 2 or 3 years without being in the hospital, and she was just living her life day by day. One night, I dreamed that she was sitting in her chair and her eyes rolled back. She fainted in the dream, and somehow, I knew she had passed away. When I woke up, I was so relieved to see that she was still there, still breathing, still alive. But in January of this year, she fainted while using the bathroom. She stopped breathing for 2 or 3 minutes. I got her off the commode, helped get her breathing again, cleaned her up, and called 911. The hospital told us she was dealing with organ failure, and even though it wasn't exactly like the dream, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a connection. Then last month, she had a GI bleed while she was on blood thinners. She was bleeding badly, and her kidneys shut down completely. The doctors stopped the blood thinners and gave her IV fluids, and somehow her kidneys started working again. After that, she came home on hospice. One Monday morning, we all woke up and found that she had passed. She had transitioned during the night. I feel like I've been getting signs my whole life, but I still don't always know what to do with them. After my mom passed, we had to tell my grandmother. She's in a nursing home, and honestly, no one there would have told her yet. But when we told her, she said she already knew. I asked her, "How did you know?" And she told us that my mom had come to her in a dream the night before and told her she had passed away. I still don't know what to make of that. There have been other things too. When I was younger, I used to see a man in a tall hat. Later, my nephew, who is 12 now, told us he saw the same figure when he was around 4 years old. He saw him in the hallway at my grandmother's house. I showed him pictures of different hats, just to see what he would pick. He pointed to the same kind of hat I remembered seeing, the tall top hat. I had seen that same man at my grandmother's old house too. When my sister was pregnant with my nephew, she saw him standing at the end of her bed. She believes there's something spiritual around our family. She says she feels ghosts around her all the time, and she thinks maybe they're attached to her because she used to live next to a funeral home. Even my father has told me he sees things sometimes, shadows moving around our house at night. So I don't really know what all of it means. I only know that these dreams and experiences have followed me for most of my life. Some of them came before terrible things happened. Some of them felt like messages, and some of them still sit in the back of my mind, quiet but heavy, like they're waiting for me to understand them. I had a really strange experience earlier, and I'm still trying to make sense of it. I should probably say first that I'm a pretty skeptical person. I don't usually jump straight to believing something was supernatural or anything like that. But this felt so different from anything I've ever experienced that I can't stop thinking about it. I was staying at my parents' house while they were away on a short trip. The house was quiet, and I decided to take a nap. I wasn't even deeply asleep. It was more like that light, drifting kind of sleep, where you still feel half aware of the room around you. At some point, I heard knocking. Then, a little later, I heard the doorbell ring. It felt real, not like something inside a dream, but I had this uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, so I didn't answer it. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I don't really know the neighbors well, so I told myself maybe it was meant for another house, or maybe I'd imagined it. Then, without realizing I had slipped into a dream, I heard movement inside the house. I got up, and suddenly my stepfather, Martin, was there. He was supposed to be away with my mother, but in the dream, it felt like he had just come back early. The odd thing was, he seemed kinder than usual. Not that Martin is unkind, because he isn't, but this kindness felt unfamiliar, almost too gentle, like someone trying to copy him after only watching him from a distance. He asked me to come with him, and I followed him into the bedroom. We talked for a moment, and I remember asking where my mother was. Then something in me just knew. I looked at him and said, "You're not Martin." I even reached out and touched his arm. It felt completely solid, warm, real. That was the part that frightened me most, I think. He didn't feel like a dream. He laughed a little, trying to act normal, and told me that of course he was Martin. But I didn't believe him. I sat down on the bed and started looking around the room. That was when I noticed the bedroom was wrong. The furniture was off, and there were 2 beds in the room, one single bed and one larger bed. My parents' room doesn't look like that at all. So I said, "Do you know how I know you're not my stepfather? They don't have 2 beds in this room." He became very still. Then, in this calm voice, he asked me what else I dreamed about. He asked if I dreamed about men, and I understood exactly what he meant. It made my skin crawl. I didn't answer him the way he wanted. I just said, I would never dream of a single bed and a double bed in the same room. That was when everything changed. There was this hissing sound, sudden and sharp, and he yelled something I couldn't understand. Then he grabbed both of my wrists. I pushed my feet against his chest to keep him away from me, and I shut my eyes as tightly as I could. I grew up Catholic, even though I haven't been to church in years, and all I could think was, Jesus Christ protects me. I repeated it over and over in my head. I started praying because I didn't know what else to do. It felt like I was trapped there for so long, just stuck in that room, with his hands around my wrists, my eyes closed, trying to hold him back. He didn't do anything else. He just stayed there, staring at me. I could feel it even with my eyes shut. Then, finally, his grip loosened, and I woke up. I've never had anything like that happen before. I don't really know what I think it was, but it felt so real that even now, I can still remember the pressure of his hands on my wrists. I need to start by saying that I work in a hospital, and this is one of those experiences that still leaves me completely stunned when I think about it. I've been a nurse at this hospital for several years now, and part of my job involves coordinating with radiology for patients who need scans, x-rays, and things like that. So over time, you get familiar with certain people from other departments, even if you're not exactly close with them. There was this older man in radiology named Martin. We weren't friends outside of work or anything like that, but whenever we crossed paths, we'd make a little small talk. He was always kind, just very calm, easygoing, the sort of coworker who made a hectic shift feel a little less sharp around the edges. This happened in December. At that time, I had a lot going on in my personal life. Some exciting things, but also just enough happening that my brain felt scattered. And with hospital schedules being what they are, it's not unusual to go weeks, sometimes even longer, without seeing certain coworkers. So one day, I was rushing through my shift, trying to get to the medication room. It's right near the area where one of the portable x-ray machines is usually kept. As I was walking by, I saw Martin standing there, messing with the x-ray machine. He looked like he was trying to unlock it or move it, but he seemed to be having trouble. I was busy, really busy, and honestly, I wasn't planning to stop and talk. I was just going to slip into the med room and keep moving. But then this feeling came over me. Not dramatic, not loud. Just this quiet little push inside me that said, "Say hi to him." So I did. I said, "Hey Martin, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while." And he looked at me and said, "Hi, I'm doing really good. How are you?" I told him, "I'm exhausted, honestly, but it's okay. I'm going on vacation soon for a couple of weeks, and I'm really excited." Then we had that normal coworker goodbye. You know, "Nice seeing you. Have a good rest of your shift." That kind of thing. And then I went into the medication room. I was only in there for maybe 2 minutes. When I came back out, Martin was gone. But the x-ray machine was still sitting there. At the time, I didn't think much of it. People disappear quickly in hospitals all the time. Someone gets called away, another patient needs something, another department pages them. It's normal. But about a month later, I was talking with another nurse on my unit. We were discussing a doctor who had recently passed away, and she said something like, "It's so sad. We lost another coworker this year too." I was confused because I only knew about the doctor, so I asked her what she meant. She told me someone from radiology had died. Then she described him. Older guy, kind, worked with the x-ray equipment, someone everyone seemed to like. And I realized she was talking about Martin. My heart just dropped. I felt awful. I assumed he must have passed while I was away on vacation or shortly after. But then she pulled up his obituary. And that's when everything inside me went cold. It said he had died in August. August. 4 months before I saw him. I immediately thought back to that exact moment in December. I know it was December. I know it was right before my vacation because I had told him I was about to leave for a few weeks. I remember where I was standing. I remember him by the X-ray machine. I remember the conversation. I spoke to him. He spoke back. And according to the obituary, he had already been gone for months. His death had been sudden and tragic, which makes the whole thing even more heartbreaking. I still don't know what to do with this memory. I don't know where to put it in my mind. But looking back, certain things feel different now. I hadn't seen him in a long time before that day. Something in me told me to stop and say hello. He was trying to move or unlock the machine, but couldn't seem to get it working. And after that day, I never saw him again. Obviously. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was grief, exhaustion, some strange trick of the hospital lights, or something I'll never be able to explain. But I know what I saw, and I know who I spoke to. I was staying at my mom's house with my little girl for a while. It was supposed to be temporary, just until my partner and I could find a place of our own. My mom is in her mid-50s, my daughter had just turned 1, and until recently, my granddad, Martin, was living there too. He passed away a little over 2 weeks ago. His room is right across from mine, and when I say right across, I mean close enough that if both doors were open, it felt like we were almost sharing the same air. The other night, around 10, I was in my room getting ready. I was doing my makeup, trying to look nice so I could take a few pictures and maybe film something for my boyfriend. The house was quiet in that heavy, late-night way. Then I heard footsteps. They were coming from my granddad's old room. Slow, dragging, uneven, exactly the way he used to walk. I stopped what I was doing and just stared at my mirror for a second. I tried to calm myself down. I told myself, no, it's probably one of the cats. We have a few of them, and they get into everything, so that explanation felt easy enough to grab onto. But deep down, I knew the sound was heavier than that. My mom had already been saying strange things had been happening. She told me her bedroom door had been locking by itself, and she kept feeling like someone was watching her. I didn't take it seriously at first. I told her she was probably just grieving and letting her mind run wild. The thing is, we've had odd experiences before. When my grandma passed back in 2023, we used to hear what sounded like her cane tapping across the wooden floor at night. My boyfriend once told us he heard a woman's voice in the kitchen saying, "Nobody appreciates anything I do around here." He had never even met my grandma. But when he repeated those words, my mom and I just looked at each other, because that was exactly the kind of thing my grandma used to say when people didn't like her cooking. Still, I always tried to explain things away. I would blame the house, the cats, the pipes, grief, anything. Until that night. Later, sometime after midnight, maybe close to 1 in the morning, I turned off my air conditioner and the TV because all the noise was making me feel overstimulated. Once everything shut off, the whole house went silent. It was just me and my daughter in the room. I was trying to get her to go to sleep, and I remember gently fussing at her, telling her it was too late for her to still be awake. And then I heard my middle name, clear as day, right outside my door. Not from down the hall, not muffled, not far away. Right there. The only person in that house who ever called me by my middle name was my granddad. For a second, my mind scrambled for an explanation. I thought maybe my mom had passed by my door and was telling me to quiet down. She does that sometimes. So I called her. She answered half asleep. That was the moment my whole body went cold. Because if she was asleep, then she wasn't standing outside my door. I just sat there staring at the door, unable to move. My heart dropped so hard it felt like my chest had turned hollow. I know what I heard. It wasn't faint. It wasn't something I had to strain for. It sounded like someone was standing on the other side of the door, saying my name with patience. That's the part I keep thinking about. It sounded patient, like whoever or whatever said it knew I had heard, like it was waiting for me to answer. And that hasn't been the only thing. Since my granddad passed, things have fallen from shelves even though they were placed securely. I felt my blanket tug at night when nobody was near me. Sometimes his bedroom door rattles softly, almost like someone is trying to open it but can't quite manage the handle. Then yesterday, that door actually swung open. That door doesn't just open on its own. It opens inward, and the hallway doesn't have any air blowing through it. The house is old, so you have to turn the handle and push hard because the door sticks against the frame. My mom was about to walk down the hallway toward the laundry room when she saw it open by itself. She completely panicked. Now we're trying to have a pastor come over to pray over us and anoint the house, because I honestly can't sleep in my room anymore. My daughter and I have been sleeping in my mom's room instead. My mom is Christian, and she believes my granddad accepted God before he died, so he should be at peace. And maybe he is. But then I keep asking myself, what is still here? Why does it still sound like someone is walking around in his room at night? I know I've been tired. I know grief can do strange things to people. Part of me wants so badly to believe I'm just exhausted and imagining things. But I can't explain that voice. I can't explain hearing my name that clearly. And I can't stop thinking about how close it sounded. Right outside my door. Waiting. I grew up in a small, rural community tucked into the foothills of western North Carolina, and I still live there today. So this story starts when I was about 13 years old, just a kid on the bicycle, pedaling around those back roads like I owned them. There was this old Victorian mansion down the street, 3 stories tall, run down, covered in vines, with windows that always seemed darker than they should have been. Every time I rode past that place, my stomach would tighten up. I didn't know why. I just knew I didn't like it. I'd start pedaling faster before I even got close. By the time I was passing the front of it, my legs would be flying. I wouldn't slow down again until that old house was well behind me. A few years later, when I was 18 and still in high school, the mansion had been restored. It had become a historic site and museum. Around Halloween, a TV station out of Charlotte did a feature on it and called it one of the most haunted places in North Carolina. Not long after that, one of my classes took a tour there. The guide told us the house had originally been built as a 2-story home for a wealthy, eccentric diamond merchant. But apparently, he decided it wasn't grand enough. So he had workers literally cut the house in half, jack up the top floor, and build a whole new floor between the two. That's how it became 3 stories. They even had photographs in the museum showing the process. During that tour, there was a psychic medium with us. When we reached the 3rd floor, she suddenly became sick. Not just a little uneasy either. She looked overwhelmed, sad, almost crushed by something. She said that one room up there carried terrible sadness. She said someone had been kept there against their will for a long time. And what made all of us go quiet was this: that room still had locks on the outside of both doors. Even the windows had locks on the outside. That stayed with me. About 6 years after that, I became a deputy with the county sheriff's office. And that mansion became a regular part of my life again, but in a very different way. The alarm there went off constantly. Hardly ever an entry alarm. Almost always interior motion, usually on the 2nd or 3rd floor. Now, the mansion had a large collection of vintage and antique dolls, and I can't tell you how many times I responded to that place. Some nights, I'd go there 5 or 6 times. Never once did I find a real break-in. Not once. I'd check the building at 10 at night, and everything would be exactly where it belonged. Then I'd come back at 3 in the morning, and dolls would be on the floor, even though they had been inside locked glass cases. The cases would still be locked. There were cold spots in that house where you could see your breath, even on hot summer nights. The hair on your arms and the back of your neck would stand straight up. After a while, every officer in the department knew there was something strange about that place. Then one cold winter night, one of our part-time reserve deputies responded to an alarm there. He was an interesting guy. His full-time job was flying large cargo jets. He'd been a professional pilot most of his adult life, but becoming a deputy had been a lifelong dream for him, so he helped us part-time whenever he could. That night, I started heading toward the mansion too, mostly because it was a long, quiet 12-hour shift and there wasn't much else happening. Before I got there, he cleared the call and asked me to meet him at a small country grocery store parking lot. When I pulled in, I could tell right away something was wrong. He looked shaken. I asked him what happened. He hesitated, then said, "Have you ever seen anything down at that mansion? I mean, anything odd?" I said, "Other than the dolls moving, the cold spots, and the alarms going off for no reason? Not really." "Why?" He tried to brush it off, but I told him he couldn't leave it there. Finally, he asked if I'd ever seen anything unusual on the 3rd floor. I told him no, but I definitely felt uneasy up there. That's when he told me what he saw. He said he pulled up, got out of his patrol car, and started shining his flashlight around the outside of the mansion. Then he looked up at a 3rd floor window. There was a young girl standing there. He said she looked about 12 or 13 years old. She was just staring down at him, holding the curtain open with one hand. He said she didn't move, didn't wave, didn't smile. After what felt like forever, she simply stepped backward into the darkness, and the curtain fell closed. He was rattled by it. After that, he avoided alarm calls at the mansion whenever he could. About 2 years later, it was my turn. It was around 2 in the morning on a cold, silent night. The call came in the same way it always did. Motion alarm, 3rd floor. I'd answered that call so many times by then that I had a routine. I'd pull in, turn on the alley light on my patrol car, circle the whole building once, and use my flashlight to check every door and window. Then I'd park, get out, and physically inspect the entry points. But that night, I didn't make it through the routine. As I pulled along the south side of the mansion, I had my alley light on and my flashlight in my hand. I started scanning the building from the 1st floor upward, moving from door to window, window to door. Then I reached the 3rd floor, and I froze. At the 2nd window, there she was, a young girl. She had long, wavy hair and was wearing an old-fashioned dress, the kind you might have seen in the early 1900s. It had buttons down the front, with lace and ruffles along both sides. Part of her hair hung forward over one shoulder, and the rest fell behind her. Her right arm was raised, holding the curtain back just enough for her to look out. And she was staring right at me. I know it probably only lasted a few seconds, but it felt much longer. I sat there, unable to move, just looking at her. Then she stepped backward into the dark. The curtain swayed where she had let it go. I felt a chill run straight up my spine. And I don't use that phrase lightly. I was scared. I still searched the house because that was my job. But I'll be honest with you, I searched it quickly. I found nothing. No open doors, no broken windows, no one inside. I cleared the call and didn't tell anybody what I'd seen for a long time. Maybe a year or two later, I was working with that same reserve deputy again. We pulled over one night to talk, and I finally told him. I said, "You know, I never told you this, but I saw her too." He looked at me, and I described her. The girl in the 3rd floor window. the dress with the lace and ruffles. The way she just stood there, staring, not blinking, not smiling, not moving, then stepping back into the darkness. He just shook his head and said, "That place gives me the creeps. There's something not right about it." And I told him I agreed. Over the years, other officers saw her too, always in that same third-floor window, never waving, never smiling, just watching. And then she'd be gone. I'll tell you this as plainly as I can, because even now, part of me understands why someone would doubt it. This all happened back in 2023. The first version of this story was much longer, honestly. I wrote down every little thing, every strange moment, every reason I became sure I wasn't just misremembering or imagining things. But it ended up being more than 30 pages, so I had to cut it down to the bones. And I know how it sounds, I really do. I was a skeptic before all this. I was sober the entire time. I don't have any history of psychosis. I wasn't looking for something supernatural. I just wanted to understand what was happening in my own house. It started after I let a friend stay with me for a few weeks. I'll call him Z. That was one of the worst decisions I've ever made. He trashed my home, screamed at me constantly, and then refused to leave for months. In the end, I had to get a restraining order. I agreed to hold on to his belongings until the police allowed him to collect them. And then the house changed. At first, it was little things. Objects showing up where I definitely hadn't left them. Sounds from other rooms, doors opening, things being dropped. Not once or twice, but over and over, day and night, for weeks. I tried to be rational. I really did. I checked myself constantly. I made sure I wasn't just being forgetful, but it became too frequent to explain away. Then I started seeing shadows at the edges of my vision. They would vanish the second I looked straight at them. One night, I was hanging Z's clothes outside after washing them, because the smell had been driving me mad. I looked back toward the house and saw the sliding glass door wide open. I knew I had closed it. Then I noticed one of his wet shirts was back inside, sitting on the coffee table. It had been folded neatly, with the image on the front perfectly displayed. It was Hannibal Lecter, except the way it was folded made the antlers on the design look like they were growing straight out of his head. I tried to act brave. I actually said out loud, "Very funny. You're real scary, aren't you?" I didn't feel brave, not even close. Then I turned around. The sliding door was wide open again. Later, I found strange things arranged on the chest where I kept my paperwork. The broken head of an ornament. A few items that had belonged to my father. Things that had no reason to be in my house at all. And there was this smell coming from the chest. A heavy, awful smell. Like death. I was convinced I was about to find something terrible inside. I tried the combination lock, but it wouldn't open. The numbers had somehow changed. That was when I broke. I ran to bed, curled up in the dark, and whispered, "Please help me. There's something in the box." And then I realized there was something in the bed, under the covers. I had partly laid on top of it. It was warm, solid, still. Like it knew I had noticed and was hoping I would pretend I hadn't. It felt too small to be a person, too big to be an animal. Maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. I'm ashamed to admit this, but I was too scared to pull the covers back. I just lay there, frozen, trying not to react. Eventually I whispered, "Please, I need a clue." When I went back out, Z's tarot deck was sitting on the kitchen counter. Apparently that was the clue. At dawn, the smell from the chest was gone. I managed to break the lock, and thankfully, there was nothing inside but paperwork. Another day, I found a page from Z's sketchbook placed at the foot of my bed. It had a threatening poem on it. It wasn't newly written. The date on the page was from before he ever moved in, so it clearly hadn't been written about me. But I know, with absolute certainty, that it had not been on my bed earlier. I lost my temper. I shouted, "Show yourself!" The glass door was suddenly yanked open. Then I heard someone scrambling over the fence. A car door slammed. I ran outside just in time to see a car tear away from the street. And behind it, chasing inches from the bumper, were red-tailed black cockatoos. Maybe 20 of them. It couldn't have been Z. He didn't know how to drive. When I went back inside, the entry room was full of wasps. I still don't understand how. The door had only been open for a moment. I shut myself in my bedroom and tried to ignore the thudding and scraping against the window behind me. When I finally got the courage to look, there were dozens of plant pots piled up against the glass. I called the police after that, but they didn't really know what to do with me. They were polite enough, but skeptical. I could hear it in their voices. A few days later, I was in town when a little boy ran up to me with this huge smile on his face. He said, "Congratulations, you're going to meet him." Then he ran off. That night, muddy footprints started appearing on the tiles. Big ones. Not once, but repeatedly. I called someone I knew, an Aboriginal elder who understood things connected to wetland spirits. I live near wetlands, so by then I was willing to consider anything. She told me her uncle had been a medicine man and that she would ask his spirit to help. She said he had been a smoker, so if I smelled smoke, that meant he was nearby. Later, I did smell smoke, but not cigarette smoke. It was wood smoke, coming from 3 large trees outside. I walked around the garden, searching for fire, but there was nothing. No flames, no smoke I could see. Later, I found 3 empty nests, 1 in each tree. The underside of each nest was scorched. The trees themselves were untouched. The strange part is that her uncle's moiety, something like a totem animal, was the red-tailed black cockatoo. The same birds I had seen chasing that car. Except the birds had appeared before I had even asked her for help. One night, I suddenly felt dread settle over the house. Not ordinary fear, something deeper. The kind your body understands before your mind catches up. Within minutes, the temperature dropped from a hot summer night to a cold so sharp it felt dangerous. I tried to sleep and woke up gasping for breath. I moved to the couch, and the cold disappeared instantly, like I had stepped out of a walk-in freezer. Then it became hot. Not warm, not stuffy, scorching. The heat burned so badly I had to fight not to scream. I moved again, and the air cooled, like I had stepped out of an oven. This went on for hours. I kept moving, and whatever it was kept finding me, freezing or burning, back and forth, again and again. Eventually, something in me changed. I stopped reacting the same way. I don't mean I became fearless. I didn't. But I learned not to feed it. I learned that whatever this was, fear seemed to make it stronger. When I stopped giving it that, it started losing its grip. Slowly, things returned to normal. Mostly. Because one day, one of Z's old game cards appeared on my desk. It had a message on it. Something about coming back in a few years, once the fungus had died off, and then seeing what was inside the chest. And I'll be honest with you, I really, really don't like that. I heard this story from a full-time staff member I used to know. I'll call him Dean. Dean had worked for the city for most of his life, moving between different community centers over the years. But there was one place he always spoke about differently. South Common Community Center. That building had a strange history. This happened one night before I was even born. Dean was working the night shift. He had already finished most of his chores, so he was sitting in the library, watching videos on the computer. The whole place was empty except for him and his supervisor, Shane. Now, Shane had a habit. Whenever he wanted Dean to get moving again, he would bang on the metal gates to get his attention. So while Dean was sitting there, he suddenly heard it. Bang, bang, bang. Then a voice called out his name. Dean, hey, come on, time to get back to work. Dean turned off the computer and walked down to the workshop, thinking Shane was waiting for him. But when he got there, Shane was asleep in a chair. Dean tapped him on the shoulder, and Shane woke up irritated, asking what he wanted. Dean said, "Didn't you just call me?" And Shane looked at him and said, "I've been asleep the whole time." That was enough for Dean. He was so shaken that he spent the rest of the shift hiding in the shop, waiting for morning. Years later, after Dean had transferred to another center, something else happened in that same building. A friend of his was working a night shift at South Common while a professional cleaning crew was there steam cleaning the library carpets. It was two women, and the part-timer on duty was supposed to keep an eye on them. At one point, he stepped into another room for just a moment. When he came back, the police were at the door. One of the women had run out of the building in a panic and driven to a nearby community center to call for help. She said something, or someone, had attacked them in the library. The police searched the entire building. They found nobody. That woman was so terrified that she quit right then and there. From what I was told, she took a job in a kitchen afterward because she wanted morning shifts only. She never wanted to work nights again. After hearing those stories, I started asking around. And the strange part is that a lot of long-term staff already knew about South Common. People who had worked there said they heard their names being called when no one was there. They saw figures. Doors slammed on their own. Metal gates shook like someone was trying to get their attention. Eventually, the building was demolished and replaced with a new one. But I've been to that site at night, and even with the old building gone, there's still something off about it. The air feels colder there. Not just regular cold either. It has that heavy feeling, like the place remembers things. Like something is still watching from where the walls used to be. And honestly, it made me think about my own experience. Mine wasn't as scary because it happened in the afternoon, but it still bothered me. I was home alone one day when I suddenly heard my mom calling me. I answered, "What?" a few times, but nobody replied. My parents used to do that sometimes, call me and then not answer when I called back, so I got annoyed and left my room to see what she wanted. But no one was there. I checked everywhere. The garage, the backyard, the living room, the basement, my siblings' rooms, my parents' room, even the driveway. Nothing. I was confused, but mostly irritated, so I went back to my room. Then it happened again. My name was called, and right after that, there was knocking on the door. This time, I ignored it. I stayed in my room and refused to go looking again. I didn't come out until I heard the front door open, because that meant someone had actually come home. That happened a little over 10 years ago, and I don't live in that house anymore. But I still remember the feeling of standing there, searching every room, knowing I had heard someone call me, and slowly realizing there was no one there. I've had strange things happen around me for as long as I can remember, but this house was different. Back in 2021, my husband and I moved into his dad's old place. It had been built by his grandfather, so there was a lot of family history in those walls. It was a decent-sized house, 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a living room, dining room, kitchen, and a little laundry room off to the side. When you walked in, the living room was on the left, and the dining room and kitchen were on the right. Then there was a hallway with 2 bedrooms on each side. At first, Only 2 of the bedrooms were really usable because we were still remodeling. The first thing happened while we were still working on the house. It was me, my husband, and our 20-year-old son, Caleb. My husband had gone to bed earlier, and Caleb and I stayed up a little later. Eventually, we decided it was time to call it a night too. My husband and I were sleeping in the back bedroom on the right. Caleb was sleeping outside in the camper. The only other finished bedroom was the one across the hall, but my father-in-law had passed away in that room not long before, and none of us felt ready to sleep in there yet. So I went into our room, and my husband was already asleep, facing the wall. I climbed into bed and kind of curled up behind him. Caleb had already gone outside to the camper. A few minutes later, I heard what sounded exactly like Caleb's voice say, "Mama." Now, Caleb has always liked scaring me. He thinks it's hilarious. So I turned my head and said, "What?" Nothing. No answer at all. I got irritated because I thought he was standing there messing with me. So I rolled over onto my left side, facing the bedroom door, thinking, "All right, I'll catch you this time." Not even 5 minutes passed. My eyes were still open. Then I heard it again. "Mama." I sat straight up and ran into the hallway. I went through the living room, out the side door, and toward the camper. And there was Caleb, sitting inside with the light on, talking on the phone. There was no way he could have gotten back outside that fast and locked everything behind him. I knocked on the camper door and asked, "Did you just come inside?" He looked confused and said, "No, why?" I just said, "No reason," and went back inside, but I was terrified. I don't think I slept at all that night. The second thing happened a couple of years later, after the remodeling was finished. By then, my husband and I were using the back bedroom on the left as our room, the same room where his dad had passed. One evening, we were both in there folding clothes on the bed. We were standing close together, facing the same direction. Then I heard it, but it wasn't just hearing it. I felt it right against my neck. A voice said, "Get out." My whole body went cold. I turned and looked at my husband, and he was already staring at me. Before I could even ask, he said, "I didn't say that." I said, "You heard it too?" He nodded and said, "Yep." The third time was the worst. My husband and I were in that same bedroom. I was walking out of the room, holding a cup with papers tucked inside it, when something shoved me hard. I mean, violently. Everything in my hands went flying. The cup, the papers, all of it scattered across the floor. My husband saw it happen. He jumped up and said, "What in the world? Are you okay?" He told me later that it looked like something had pushed me, but there was nothing there. Nothing either of us could see. The next day, our middle daughter told us that something had grabbed her arm the night before. She said it squeezed her so hard that it left fingerprint marks. She didn't know anything about me being shoved. We hadn't told her yet. There's one more part to this, and I know it might sound strange. My husband had a friend whose wife claimed to practice witchcraft. We're Christians, so that already made me uncomfortable, but we had gone over to visit them once before the shoving happened. I had brought some of my rocks and crystals with me because I collected them at the time. She looked through them and told me one of them was a seeing stone. She said if you looked through it, you could see things that weren't from this world. I tried it at her house, and I saw something. She had always talked about having a familiar, and when I looked through that stone, I saw it. I don't even like describing it. It looked dark and twisted, almost devilish. It scared me so badly that I stopped looking through it right then. But later, when we got home, curiosity got the best of me. I looked through it again, and I saw a woman standing in our bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror. Then she turned toward me. Half of her face was missing. I threw that stone away immediately. After the shoving happened, I prayed over the house and blessed every room. I meant it with my whole heart. And since then, nothing else has happened. When I was little, maybe 9 or 10, I woke up very early one morning to the sound of my mom crying in the kitchen. Not just a quiet cry either. It was that deep, broken kind of crying that makes a house feel smaller somehow. My dad had left not long before that, and Mom was really struggling. She was trying to hold herself together, but even as a kid, I could tell she was falling apart. People would come by now and then, friends or relatives, just to sit with her and make sure she was all right. The night before, Mom had told me an old friend of hers was coming over. I'd never met the woman, but Mom mentioned she had a son around my age. I remember feeling this little spark of excitement because I was an only child, and it was school holidays, so the idea of having another kid around felt enormous. That night, Mom barely slept. I could hear her moving through the house, crying in the kitchen, then in the lounge room, then outside near the laundry. At one point, I looked out my bedroom window and saw her wandering around the garden in the moonlight, just looking at the plants and crying. That image has stayed with me all these years. So when I heard voices in the kitchen the next morning, I thought, she's here, her friend's here, and maybe her son is too. I got out of bed and walked down the hall, feeling hopeful in that simple way kids do. To get to the kitchen, I had to pass the laundry and the back door. And that's where I saw him. A boy, about my age, sitting on the back steps. He had light brown hair and was wearing a faded blue t-shirt. He was facing away from me, looking out into the yard. I went straight over and tapped him gently on the shoulder. He turned around and smiled. He didn't say anything, not a single word. But he opened his hand, and there was this little beetle crawling across his palm. It was striped orange and black, the kind we used to see all over the garden at that time of year. He looked at me, still smiling, and held out his hand like he wanted me to take the beetle. So I did. The beetle crawled from his hand onto mine, up over my fingers and across my wrist. And somehow, that was enough. I started talking. I talked his ear off, honestly. I told him about my toys, my favorite shows, the games I liked, probably every strange little thing that mattered to me back then. And he just listened. He didn't nod much. He didn't answer. He just smiled and followed me around the garden. It didn't bother me that he was quiet. I figured maybe he was shy, or maybe he had some reason he couldn't speak. Kids don't always need explanations for things. Sometimes someone sits beside you, and that's enough. For a while, it felt like I'd made a friend. After some time, I decided we should get snacks. I told him to come inside with me and said we could get cordial from the kitchen where our mums were talking. He followed me across the yard and back to the steps, but he wouldn't come inside. He just stood there at the back door, smiling at me, in the same spot where I'd first seen him. I told him it was fine, that he could come in, but he stayed where he was. So I went in without him. I walked into the kitchen, probably grinning from ear to ear, and told Mom and her friend that I'd been playing with her son and that he was really nice. The room went quiet. Mom looked at me strangely. Her friend did too. Then the woman gently said she was sorry, but she hadn't been able to bring her son with her that morning. I remember just staring at them, completely confused. Then I ran back to the back door. The boy was gone. There was no one on the steps, no one in the yard, no movement anywhere. Just a few of those orange and black beetles crawling over the concrete where he'd been standing. I never saw that boy again. And even now, after all these years, I still don't know who I spent that morning with. I work long night shifts, usually from about 6 in the evening until 6 in the morning. So by the time I get home, the whole world feels half asleep. Most mornings, I pull into the driveway just after sunrise, let myself in quietly, and the dogs barely react. They know my routine. They know the sound of my boots, my keys, the way I open the front door. My partner, Laura, is usually still asleep when I get in. She doesn't have to be up for work until later, so the house is normally still and dark when I walk through it. But one morning, a few months back, everything was wrong. I opened the door and there she was, standing at the far end of the hallway, just staring at me. She looked absolutely terrified. Before I could even ask what was going on, she ran straight toward me and ducked behind me like she was hiding from something. She kept saying, "Someone's in our room. I know someone's in our room." I was exhausted, still halfway in night shift fog, but that woke me up instantly. Looking back, I probably should have grabbed something first. There's a crowbar near the laundry, and I've got tools in the garage. But in that moment, I didn't think. I just marched down the hall as loudly and quickly as I could. The dogs went completely mad because they had no idea what was happening. I switched on every light I could reach and went straight into the bedroom. Nothing. The room was empty. I checked the wardrobe. I checked behind the curtains. I checked the windows. Everything was shut, locked, and untouched. Then I went through the rest of the house while Laura stayed right behind me, shaking. I even went outside with a torch and checked the garden shed and the side gate. There was no one there. Everything was secure. Once she calmed down enough to explain, she told me that a couple of hours earlier, sometime around 3 or 4 in the morning, she was sure she'd heard me come home. She said the dogs didn't bark, which made sense to her because they never bark at me. She heard the front door open. She heard someone walk down the hallway. She felt someone standing beside the bed for a moment. Then, according to her, I leaned down, kissed her cheek, and whispered something softly into her ear. After that, she felt me get into bed and wrap my arm around her. The worst part is what happened when my actual truck pulled into the driveway a few hours later. That sound woke her up, and when she opened her eyes, she could still feel an arm around her. Tight, heavy, real. Then she heard me come in through the front door. I checked the locks again. I checked the security camera that points at the driveway, which covers the only entrance to the property. Nothing showed up. No person, no movement, no vehicle besides mine. And the 3 dogs, who would usually lose their minds if a stranger came anywhere near the house, hadn't reacted at all. By some strange bit of timing, I had the next few days off work. That helped. We stayed together, kept the lights on more than usual, and eventually the fear faded into the background. After a while, I convinced myself Laura must have had some kind of vivid dream, or maybe sleep paralysis, or maybe she'd half woken and imagined the whole thing. That explanation worked for me, for a little while. Then, about 2 weeks ago, something happened to me. I was sleeping during the day after another night shift. The house was quiet. Laura was at work. The dogs were settled. Then I woke up because someone was whispering directly into my ear. Not across the room. Not from the hallway. Right into my ear. I came awake in a panic, and the whispering stopped almost immediately. But there were a couple of seconds, just as I opened my eyes, where I could still hear it. I know I could. It was a voice. I couldn't understand what it was saying. It wasn't clear words, more like rushed, broken nonsense. But it was close enough that I felt breathless afterward, like something had been leaning over me. And ever since that moment, I've had the worst neck pain I've ever felt. Heavy, deep, constant. Like I slept wrong, except it hasn't gone away. I haven't told Laura. I know exactly how she'd react. She'd probably hide my keys before my next shift just so I couldn't leave her alone in the house. I try not to think about it too much because, honestly, It makes my skin crawl. But I keep coming back to one thought. Something came home before I did, and now I'm not sure it ever left. I want to start by explaining the layout of my childhood home because it matters to the story. When you walk through the front door, the stairs went straight up to this tiny landing. There was a bathroom right there, with one bedroom on the left and another on the right. It was a really small space, almost like the whole upstairs paused for a second before splitting off into rooms. My bedroom was one of those rooms, and I slept on the top bunk. The head of my bed lined up almost perfectly with the doorway, which meant that if my bedroom door was open, I could see straight out onto that little landing. This happened more than 20 years ago, when I was around 10 years old. I was living there with my parents and my two brothers. One night, I woke up in the middle of the night for no obvious reason. I wasn't having a nightmare, at least not that I remember. I just opened my eyes and was suddenly awake. The first thing I noticed was that the landing light was on. That was strange, because my parents were very serious about not wasting electricity. Lights did not just stay on in our house, but I figured maybe one of them had forgotten, or maybe my older brother had gotten up and left it on by accident. Then I heard it. A soft whistling. Not loud, not sharp, just this gentle little tune, like someone nearby was casually whistling to themselves. I looked toward the doorway, and that's when I saw him. There was a small gray figure sitting on top of my bedroom door. The door opened outward onto the landing, which was unusual, but because of that, I could see the figure clearly in the light. He was perched right there on the top edge of the door, fully visible. And when I say gray, I mean completely gray. No face, no features, no clothes, no real details at all. He looked almost like a simple drawing of a little person that someone had colored in with a pencil. A rounded head, rounded limbs, not quite human, but close enough that I knew what I was looking at. The best way I can describe it is that he looked like he had stepped out of an old black and white television show and somehow become real. At first, I was more confused than scared. I sat up in bed and stared harder, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But he was still there. The light was on. There weren't any shadows moving around. Nothing was flickering. I could see the landing, the door, and that little gray figure sitting on top of it. I don't remember him moving. I just remember the whistling and the way he sat there like he belonged in the quiet of the house. The next morning, I told my parents and my brothers what I had seen. They laughed. Not in a cruel way, really. More like they thought I had dreamed it or imagined it. And honestly, the story became a family joke after that. Even now, years later, someone will bring up the little gray man on the door and laugh about it. But I still think about it, because I know I was awake. I know the light was on, and I know what I saw sitting there. So I have to ask, has anyone else ever experienced something like this? Because more than 20 years later, I still wonder what in the world that little gray figure could have been. So I've been trying to make sense of something that's been happening at work, and honestly, I still don't know what to call it. Maybe it's paranormal. Maybe someone is living somewhere they shouldn't be. Maybe there's something suspicious going on that has nothing to do with ghosts at all. I keep turning it over in my mind, and every explanation feels possible in its own strange way. I work as an in-home caregiver, so I spend a lot of time inside clients' personal homes. Back in January, I started working with a new client. I'll call her Mrs. Hallie. She lives alone in this large, older house. Her husband passed away, they never had children, and she has a power of attorney who handles her affairs. When I first started there, she was also new to our agency, so I was one of the first caregivers assigned to her. On my very first shift, I relieved another caregiver who had worked overnight. She gave me the usual rundown about Mrs. Halley's care, but then she lowered her voice and told me the house felt creepy. She said that all night she'd heard noises upstairs, footsteps running back and forth, furniture dragging across the floor, and she said it happened almost like clockwork, hour after hour. That alone unsettled me, because Mrs. Halley lives alone. No one is supposed to be upstairs. In fact, we are not allowed to go upstairs at all. My first shift was during the day, but after that, I mostly worked nights. I'll be honest, I was nervous before my first overnight shift, especially because that same caregiver later told me she had once seen a dark figure standing at the top of the stairs. But during my first night, I didn't hear the running or the furniture dragging. I kept glancing up the staircase, but I never saw anything. I did hear random noises here and there, but nothing as dramatic as what she described. Still, there was one part of the house that always felt off to me. The bathroom sits underneath the staircase, and whenever I went in there, I felt this strange, static energy. I don't know how else to explain it. It was like the air had a charge to it. On other nights, I started hearing whispering. Sometimes it sounded like a man and a woman talking softly somewhere in the house. One night, there was a lot of whispering, and then I heard this sound that was almost like a cat crying, except not quite. It sounded more like a woman moaning. We have a baby monitor so we can keep an eye and ear on Mrs. Halley, and I knew the sound wasn't coming from her because I didn't hear it through the monitor. After a few weeks, things started calming down. The noises became less frequent. A lot of us caregivers began wondering if maybe Mrs. Halley's husband was still in the house somehow, watching over her. From what I understand, they were very private people. They didn't like strangers in their home, and Mrs. Halley has had a hard time accepting that she needs care around the clock now. She used to be very independent. So part of me wondered if maybe her husband's spirit was uneasy at first, seeing all these unfamiliar people coming in and out of the house, taking care of his wife. Maybe once he realized we were there to help her, he settled down. There was also one caregiver who had been acting suspiciously, possibly stealing. She suddenly quit, almost like she was trying to avoid being caught. A couple of weeks after she left, I realized the strange activity had mostly stopped. That made me wonder even more if Mrs. Halley's husband, if he really is still there, reacts when someone in the house has bad intentions. For several weeks after that, everything was quiet. Then, about 2 weeks ago, we had a big meeting to update Mrs. Halley's care plan. Her needs had changed, and the agency wanted all the main caregivers on the same page. Since we were all attending the meeting, my boss sent someone new to stay with Mrs. Halley during the day. The power of attorney joined the meeting over FaceTime. At one point, one of the caregivers asked him if he watches the cameras in the home to see how we interact with Mrs. Halley and make sure everything is going smoothly. He said he doesn't like to sit there and stalk the cameras, but if there's ever an issue, he'll go back and review footage. Then he said he mostly watches the cameras upstairs because no one is allowed to go up there, and he wants to make sure nobody does. That answer bothered me. If anyone would know what's going on upstairs, it would be him. But whenever my boss has mentioned that caregivers hear noises up there, he apparently acts like it's nothing. That same day, after the meeting, I relieved the new caregiver for my night shift. She filled me in on what had happened while she was there, and what she told me genuinely rattled me. At one point during her shift, Mrs. Halley went to her bedroom to take a nap. The caregiver went toward the bathroom, and from that hallway, you can see the front door. When she turned the corner, the front door was standing wide open. We are never supposed to use that door. We enter and leave through the garage. The front door has a strong deadbolt, and when the caregiver went to close it, she said the lock was so tight she could barely get it locked again. She called my boss. The power of attorney checked the camera footage and supposedly there was no sign of anyone opening the door. Mrs. Hallie was asked if she wanted the police called, and she said no. But honestly, I would have called anyway. She isn't really in a position to make those kinds of decisions for herself, and after finding a locked front door wide open, I would need peace of mind. After that caregiver left, I closed the garage behind her. Mrs. Hallie was so frightened by what had happened that she locked herself in her bedroom for the night. That created another problem, because the monitor had gone missing that same day. Mrs. Hallie has never liked being watched constantly, and we later figured out she had probably hidden it or thrown it away. But at that moment, I had no monitor, and she was locked in her room, and she wasn't answering when I knocked. I called my boss and explained what was happening. My boss sent another caregiver, I'll call her Elena, to help me get the bedroom door open before we had to call the power of attorney or 911. While I was on the phone with my boss, I suddenly heard noises outside, near the driveway. I thought Elena had arrived, so I opened the laundry room door and was about to open the garage door. Then I stopped. The sounds were coming from right outside the rolling garage door. It sounded like heavy things being dragged back and forth, followed by banging. My boss told me Elena was still on her way, so it couldn't have been her. It wasn't windy. The neighboring houses are too far away for the sound to have been someone moving trash cans nearby. This sounded like it was right there in Mrs. Hallie's driveway. Eventually, Elena arrived and I let her in. After I knocked harder and called to Mrs. Hallie more loudly, she finally opened her bedroom door. We checked on her and made sure she was okay. She agreed to leave the door cracked open slightly, so I could check on her throughout the night. We never found the missing monitor. My boss replaced it with a new one. Later, my boss told me Mrs. Hallie had experienced break-ins in the past, and that's part of why she's so paranoid about the front door. Since then, I've started keeping a taser with me when I work there. And now, I don't know what to think. Part of me really does believe Mrs. Haley's husband may still be in that house, and I don't feel like he's harmful. If anything, I feel like he might be protective. But the front door opening, the past break-ins, the noises outside the garage, and everything about the upstairs area make me wonder if something else is happening too. Maybe there's a squatter. Maybe a frogger. Maybe the power of attorney is hiding something upstairs. No one is allowed upstairs. There are cameras up there, so I can't sneak up and look, even though I absolutely would if I thought I could get away with it. Every caregiver has reported hearing sounds from that area, and my boss has admitted that everyone is curious about it. There was also a recent situation where Mrs. Haley got injured, and my boss wanted the power of attorney to check the camera footage to confirm what happened. I said I was worried there wouldn't be footage, because there isn't a visible camera in her bedroom. That's when my boss said, "The power of attorney has more cameras than we can see." So now I'm wondering, are there hidden cameras in the house? And if so, where? Why is he the only person with access to them? Why is he the only one allowed upstairs? Mrs. Haley has close friends who help her, not just him. And from what I understand, they aren't allowed upstairs either. The thing that keeps bothering me is this. He doesn't seem especially concerned with watching how we care for Mrs. Haley. He seems most concerned with making sure nobody goes upstairs. Every other client I've had with cameras had them because family members, or a power of attorney, wanted to make sure care was being handled properly. They checked interactions, safety, routines, all of that. But here, the focus is upstairs. So I'm stuck between a few possibilities. Maybe Mrs. Haley's husband's spirit really is there. Maybe he's protective. Maybe he reacts when something is wrong. But maybe there's also something very human going on inside that house, and I don't know how to find out. I can't place my own cameras because it isn't my home. I can't sneak upstairs without probably being caught. I don't know where any hidden cameras might be, because everything looks normal. All I know is that something about that house feels unfinished. like there's a closed door inside the story, and everyone keeps pretending not to hear what's behind it.